Sperling.
Here.
And I will state that we are holding this meeting in person and via Zoom, live on the internet pursuant to the governor's executive order due to the COVID pandemic ongoing. So it is a little bit modified. I would like to do the pledge, but just so it's not super weird, if anybody that's on Zoom could mute, just so, because it's a super delay, but it would be nice to rise and join in the pledge if you can. Thank you. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you all. Appreciate it. All right. Moving on to the public participation portion of the meeting. I would actually like to go slightly out of order if possible and invite the Oswego Fire Protection District Referendum Committee presentation just so we can send you on your way afterwards. Obviously, we're very interested to hear what you have to say, but thank you for coming this evening. If you could introduce yourself and the floor is yours.
My name is, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Through the mask. My name is David Edelman. I'm a lifelong resident of Oswego, Illinois. Grew up in Oswego. Appreciate the relationship with the Oswego and Montgomery. You've had a lot of friends I grew up with had Montgomery addresses. So thank you very much for letting me speak this evening before your village board. I come here tonight to talk to you about the rescue referendum tax increase that we are asking from the community for the Oswego Fire Protection District. I am a volunteer. I'm part of the committee for Friends of Oswego Fire, and we are out trying to educate the public on the needs for the Fire Protection District. One of the major needs for this referendum that's upcoming is for a fourth paramedic ambulance to be put on the streets. I was surprised that the district is almost 70,000 people that it serves. We need an additional full-time ambulance. We only have 3 as of today. The district has not asked for an increase for over 18 years now. We've seen calls go from 2,000 calls a year to almost 6,000 calls in 2020, which is a significant increase. We've doubled the number of stations. We've increased firefighters and paramedics from 17 to 75. The cost of equipment over that time, unfortunately, has gone up significantly. New fire engines, $650,000 each. Cardiac monitors, now $44,000. Breathing apparatus from $2,000 to $7,000. Obviously, COVID has presented great challenges for our fire district as well. Have to sanitize the vehicles, the paramedic teams as well. How much is this going to cost the average homeowner? It's about $75 a year per average home of $225,000. What is the benefit? Obviously, having that fourth ambulance on the streets is critical with almost 6,000 calls annually. Other parts of this referendum will continue to address the growth in the community. Obviously, in Montgomery, you have a large apartment complex going up over by Sam's. Downtown Oswego, we have the Shodine project, many other homes. This area continues to grow. Obviously, Oswego and Montgomery, we've grown together over the years, which is certainly a good thing. The district has done a lot to continue to cut costs. We have received grants from the state and federal government of over $1 million, secured from government surplus of $700,000, and we do a lot of the in-house service as well, which saves us $300,000. Unfortunately, these things continue to grow with the growth in the community, and obviously so do the costs that come with it. Obviously, what happens if this doesn't pass? Obviously, the service to the community, most importantly, that fourth full-time ambulance is important, but obviously the future growth. We have signs available if anybody would like them for businesses. We've been walking around, and I am proud and very pleasant to say that just about everybody has not only said yes, but they're very proud to put this up in their business. And then we have yard signs as well that are available, and we even have the big 4x4 as well. You're the eyes and ears, and obviously people follow you and respect you. Whatever you can do to help promote this, this is ultimately about public safety. I know these are difficult times for everyone. I can appreciate that. I'm a business owner. I have elderly parents that still live in the community, and I'm a homeowner as well. So obviously it's an impact on me, but I absolutely support the women and men of the fire department who in turn, regardless of what happens, you call 911, they're going to be there for you no matter what. So this is about the betterment of the community. So we have a real quick video. I know you have a lot on the agenda. I think everyone will enjoy it. And I thank you again for your time. Whatever you can do to support us would be much appreciated. Thank you.
Thanks, Dave.
Thanks, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Do you guys have a website, or if there was residents that were interested in more information or helping?
Hey everybody, Danny Mott here. Thanks for joining us this week. How would you like to stop hitting the ground or the golf ball?
Autoplay
Basically,
on
how would you like to
YouTube.
get ball
Nice.
first contact? So important, isn't it? Now, I wasn't going to share this video with you today because I've done a few of these on my channel, but
We're almost,
I thought Dave
we're
became
well
British.
into it. Let's rock and roll. Let's watch that thing. Thank you, though. I really appreciate it. All right. Sound good?
Yeah, just in case anyone's questioning why Oswego Fire Protection District is here at the Montgomery Village Board meeting, they protect a little bit over 55% of our community is protected by Oswego Fire. So that's why this is a very appropriate partnership that we have with them, along with the training facility, which was actually in the video. There was the training facility that we donated the land for.
Thank you. It's a nice video. It also will, it may win you a referendum, and also find you some more firefighters in the future. So I'm sure there's people willing to sign up. All right. Well, thank you. Appreciate it. All right. So we'll move back up to item A under public participation is the public comment portion. Like I stated at the onset, this is the portion of the meeting where any member of the public can address the board on any topic. Would ask that you keep your comments to 2 minutes or less. If your neighbor or friend had made the same comment, you can just reiterate that and we'll make note. But we're here to listen. So with that, is there any member of the public that wishes to address the board? I guess just so we get a clear understanding from a raise of hand here, how many people are interested in speaking this evening? 1, 2, 3. Okay. And then we'll do online. If there's anybody online or remote, they can do it afterwards. So, all right, come on down.
Good evening. Thank you for your time. My name is Jeff Hester. I'm a resident on 322 North River Street here in Montgomery. There's 8 households that are there, and it's been brought to our attention that the village is wishing to rezone that property. There's a number of issues that we've got with it. Limitations on our use for the property. There's things as far as financing our residents and stuff like that. I've talked to my mortgage lender this morning. I'm in the process of refinancing right now, and he said that by rezoning, it's going to quash that. It's going to put implications upon it. There's limitations on what we're going to be able to do with our property that's going to restrict us, is not give us the same rights as other residences in the area. I understand the village wants to go forth and rezone that in the future plan, but until that time comes, I don't see the benefit in rezoning it or restricting us, or feeling like as residents of the village that we're trying to be pushed out or restricted on what we can do with the property that we own. You know, that's our homes. That's just, you know, that's that place that you get to come home to in the evening. You get to spend time with your family. We enjoy Montgomery days. We see you all there. You see us all there. We do our best to work with everybody, you know, and, you know, make the best of everything. And I think we've, you know, throughout the time, you know, we've been very pleasant to deal with, and we, you know, try to keep everything in order. We try to watch over the park, you know, anything going on, but just there's restrictions that, you know, insurance restrictions. One of the biggest things is just taking away rights as a homeowner and feeling, you know, not understanding what the purpose would be on doing this right now, instead of waiting till you've got a developer or something in the works that you've got somebody interested in doing this. And then it can be brought forth at that time. And, you know, in many years of business myself, when properties are going to be redeveloped or somebody's coming in to purchase them, that's when it's approached to the city to redevelop it. You know, when we were here at the meeting last week, we saw, you know, a couple of things come through, and people have brought it to the attention that they'd like to be, you know, rezoned and brought forth. The city, the village allowed that, and, you know, at that time, and it was in a timely manner. To bring forth this now, none of the residences want to go anywhere. This is our homes, and just the restrictions that this would put on us just doesn't seem fair and right at this time, and we don't understand what the benefit would be for the village, to be honest with you, at this point in time.
Okay.
Unless the village has some other agenda, you know, with things going forward.
Okay. Yeah, no other agenda. And this is good feedback to get. And I'll let all the public comments speak, and then maybe I'll ask Jared or our attorney just for a quick comment. But I know we're working through the process, and, you know, I shouldn't speak out of turn. So I'll let them speak after this, but I really appreciate you coming down here tonight, Jeff.
Thank you for the time.
Yep.
I mean,
And
this
stick
was-
around. We'll talk about it in a second once the other comments are done.
Thank you.
All right.
I just got one question. Why us?
Yeah, if you're not willing to come to the microphone for whatever reason, it's hard to, it's not really meant to be a dialogue. We can talk about overarching zoning principles if you'd like. I know the microphone didn't quite pick that up, so if you want to repeat that.
Like I said before.
Can you start with your
YS
name, sir?
Andrew Neal,
Thank you.
324 North River. I just want to know why us? Why our 8 houses? There's lots of houses, there's lots of streets in Montgomery.
Yeah,
Why us?
we'll talk about that in a second. I appreciate it.
All I wanted to know.
Thank you.
Sign this.
And then
Want my
any
address, phone number?
of
too?
the other three folks that were wanting to talk about this, or do you just kind of, did Jeff? Welcome.
Hello. My name is Cindy Adams. I have rental property here at 316 North River Street. The house is 125 years old and has been in Montgomery for a long time. I've lived in Montgomery all my life. I live on River Street, down at the other end. To receive a letter from the village explaining to us that they want to do commercial and take residential away, it's kind of a shock. If my dad were alive today, he'd say this is something that should have been discussed with us. We received a letter after the fact of what's going on, and we plead to the village to understand. If you were in the same spot as we are, you'd want somebody to listen to us, to understand that by changing residential to a commercial building, it increases our taxes. It takes away what we like to do, maybe to plant flowers out in front, to do anything that we want to do in our property to make it better for everybody to see how nice it is. It's good that Montgomery wants to develop, change things, maybe make things nicer. We all would like that, but it shouldn't be at cost to the residents of the 8 houses that live down here. I won't speak for them. I can only speak for myself. I want to stay residential. I don't want to be forced out because you want it to be commercial. Please review it. Please understand where we're coming from and respect their decision. Thank you.
Thanks, Cindy. Anybody else want to address the board? Okay. All right, she's signing in, and then Jared, did you want to give a little bit of an overview, kind of where we are? I mean, the good thing to note is that no action has been taken by the board to rezone any property at this point. Maybe Jared can talk about, why these parcels. But the one thing that's coming to mind too is when we went through a process similar to this, maybe how long ago? 5, 8 years ago, rezoning parcels into our new MD Mill District. And correct me if I'm wrong, did we allow people to opt out of that rezoning at that time? And it was all these homes? Okay. So why don't you kind of give it a little update?
Yes. So first of all, we're in the midst of the Unified Development Ordinance preparation and hopefully here a future adoption. So along with the Unified Development Ordinance, there's a zoning map update that goes with it. So that happens for 2 reasons. One is because we're proposing in the UDO to change some of the zoning districts. So for instance, right now, and I'm giving away a little bit of the presentation that's to come, but right now there are 7 different residential zoning districts in Montgomery, and we're actually trying to pare that down. So inherently, some of those districts or some of those properties will be rezoned. But we also took this opportunity to try to move closer to conformance with the comprehensive plan. And some of these parcels in the comprehensive plan are shown as Mill District. And so that's why the residents behind you received the letters informing them of this process and what the village has intended to move forward with a rezoning or propose a rezoning. So that's where we're at currently. Tonight, though, before you will be the first reading of the Unified Development Ordinance. However, the zoning map that is to accompany the ordinance has been tabled until a special meeting of the Plan Commission, which will be held on February 18th. We certainly have heard the residents, and we are working to address their concerns and have that special meeting on the 18th.
Okay. And so at that February 18th meeting, the Plan Commission will consider the full zoning map and can hear from these residents, or you'll make them aware that they came to this meeting to verbally object to being rezoned. And they will consider that at that meeting. They'll take action, which is a recommendation to this board. And is it the meeting immediately following that? You'll present that to the village board here, the first meeting in March or the 22nd?
Actually, the second meeting in February. the
Okay, so on February 22nd, we'll be back in this room to take action. So I'm going to kind of stop short of making what my own thought and recommendation would be, other than it's not our desire to push any residents in Montgomery out of the village and do something that would cause undue burden to you. So I know we have our attorney looking into the legality of some things, and I won't put you on the spot right now, Laura. But if you are able to tune in on February 18th, I know we'll be tuning in to hear kind of the deliberation, and then we'll discuss this. And if you guys want to come back on the 22nd, when we have the map, we can kind of walk through it. Does that kind of make sense?
Yes, it does. We're also, I've been reaching out to some of the residents on that stretch. I'll be working to reach out to the rest that I haven't touched base with yet to see if there's interest in having a more of a community meeting prior to that Plan Commission meeting even, where we will be able to explain what our findings are from the village attorney and et cetera prior to the Plan Commission meeting. So I'm working on that date and time. So hopefully we'll have a couple meetings to work on this.
I have a question, if I may. Why can't this be done? Like, I understand the purpose of the Unified Development Ordinance in the Mill District and the redevelopment of downtown. I get that, but if these homes are zoned residential, what does it hurt if they stay zoned residential until a developer says, hey, yeah, I do want these? Because if a developer comes and says, I want to build on these lots, the developers can't build on these lots until these residents say, hey, I'm going to sell my property.
Mhm.
I mean, that's how, what have we potentially lost by leaving these zoned as residential and waiting until a time, and if that time ever comes, where a developer says, hey, I do want to do something here?
And I don't mean to cut you off, Jared. That's a great question. And I'm sure that Plan Commission will dive into that, and we can talk about it in 2 weeks.
Well, yeah, it was good. That's why I asked it.
Well, you always do ask good questions. We can go into that now, but I guess the reason why I would just hold off on that is to get into a drawn out conversation. We don't even have the map yet, frankly.
Well, I've just given you a hint then. In 2 or 3 weeks or whenever it is, I'm going to ask that question and expect an answer.
All right.
Thank you. One other comment that I wanted to make is anybody that's here this evening, a resident in that area, I know you added your name and your address. If you have an email address that staff should have that they don't already have, if you want to provide that, we can communicate with you that way. But want to make sure that you understand what it is that we're trying to accomplish. And I think our attorney will go over, per her research, kind of what that would or wouldn't do. And then we'll go from there. But I'll kind of stop there until we get to that point. Sound good?
Just for ease of use, I'll put this over next to you.
All right. Anybody else wishing to address the board? Thank you for coming this evening. I appreciate it. We'll be talking more in the next few weeks. All right, I'll move on to the consent agenda. I'll read the items and entertain a motion for approval. We have the minutes of the village board meeting of January 25th, executive session minutes of January 25th, minutes of the special village board meeting of January 27th, executive session minutes of January 27th, the building report for January 2021, the water production report for January of 2021, the refuse report for December of 2020, accounts payable through February 4th, 2021, and the cancellation of the February Committee of the Whole.
So moved.
Moved by Marisak, second by Youngerman. Go ahead and call the roll.
Who made the motion? Doug? Trustee Marisak?
Yes.
Trustee Betzinger?
Yes.
Trustee Guyer?
Yes.
Trustee Lee?
Yes.
And Trustee Youngerman?
Yes.
Trustee Spurling?
I think I saw a yes, but I didn't hear.
Oh,
yes.
I'm sorry. Yes, sorry.
All right, that carries 6-0. Thank you. All right, moving on for separate action this evening. We'll discuss items A and B together, which is item A is a recommendation of Plan Commission of PC 2021. Siri did not like that. 2021-002, rescinding the current zoning ordinance and subdivision control ordinance and replacing it with a unified development ordinance. And then item B is ordinance 1903, adopting the new UDO. And that is first reading, so we will not take action on item B this evening. That will be in a few weeks. So with that, Senior Planner Chipman.
All right, thank you very much. I have a presentation for you this evening that I am working with Jake Side from CMAP on, so I'll run through that, and then I have a couple other items to update you on in regards to this document, and then I'll ask for questions. So bear with me for a second while I share my screen. All right, thank you very much. Before you this evening is the first review of the ordinance of the newly proposed Unified Development Ordinance. So this is something that, sorry, I'm going to turn that off to cut down on feedback. So first of all, the foundation of the Unified Development Ordinance is really stemmed from the village's comprehensive plan. So in 2014, the village approved the Go Montgomery 2035 comprehensive plan. Several of the goals of that comprehensive plan include growing responsibly and sustainably, encouraging housing options such as especially for seniors, townhomes, multifamily, continuing to build a vibrant and active downtown as something that we're certainly interested in, and the village board has made a lot of strides in that area. Attract and retain investment in commercial and industrial areas. The village has seen some commercial growth here lately, as well as some industrial growth, and we're happy that they conform with the plan and it pushes forward with the goals of the plan. Timeline, so this project kicked off in 2018 with a review of existing conditions. Into 2019, there was a lot of public outreach, thankfully prior to the pandemic, because public outreach here lately has been a little different, with some open houses, and then there was the draftings of a recommendations memo reviewed by the steering committee. In 2020, there was, excuse me, a review of the UDO, or the drafting of the actual document occurred, and that was reviewed by staff in the steering committee, and comments were given, and the document updated based on those comments. And then here in early 2021, we're looking for adoption of this document. So none of this was possible without a local technical assistance grant that the village applied for and received from CMAP. So I won't steal all of Jake's slides, but he'll give you a little bit of a broader context of what CMAP does here in the near future. Goals of the UDO to implement the comprehensive plan as recently discussed. It should be, and we feel that it is, easy to read and easy to use. We feel that it's a much more user-friendly document for residents and developers. And then updated tables and illustrations. So there's a lot of it is much more streamlined and much more easy to read and understand because of the tables and illustrations. So now I'd like to turn it over to Jake Side from CMAP to talk with you a little bit about CMAP and the rest of the document.
Thanks so much, Jared. Well, good evening, everyone. Really excited to be back speaking to the village board. Thank you so much for having us. Before we dive into the presentation, I also wanted to introduce the CMAP team. With us here tonight is my colleagues Jared Patton and Kendra Keelam. Both really enjoyed working with your staff and with your elected and appointed officials. It's been our pleasure. Just wanted to give an overview of who CMAP was before we dove into an overview of the UDO itself. And this should be pretty brief. We've worked with several of your trustees on this in the past. So for those of you who have not, hope this is a nice overview for you as well. So first of all, who is CMAP? Well, we're the regional planning agency for the Chicago region. We were created in 2005. We serve the 7-county region of Northeastern Illinois, which includes 284 municipalities. In 2018, we created the ONTO 2050 plan, which is the regional comprehensive plan, a lot like the Montgomery comprehensive plan, except a little bit wider in geography there. CMAP is funded by the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, the U.S. Department of Transportation, and the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency. We also created the LTA, Local Technical Assistance Program, which implements the regional plan and hopefully makes a more prosperous region for us all. So just to give you an overview of the zoning districts in the code. So as Jared mentioned, we've gone from 7 districts in the residential category down to 5. Our goal here was really to find ways to consolidate and streamline the zoning districts so that they match up with not only development on the ground, but also look towards the future. We have 3 business districts, 2 manufacturing districts, and 2 special districts, the floodplain overlay and the A agricultural district. We wanted to give everyone an overview of what the zoning map looks like at this point. We know this is a little bit hard to read, but in general, the yellow areas on the map are residential. The red areas on the map are the business districts, and the purple areas are the manufacturing districts. Also, under the zoning district section of the code, we're going to be introducing a lot more illustrations into the code to make it easier to use for residents and developers, and really anyone who picks up the ordinance. Each zoning district is going to have an overhead view and a 3-dimensional drawing like these to illustrate the character of each neighborhood in the community. In addition, there are design requirements for all zoning districts in the Unified Development Ordinance, or you'll hear us call it the UDO. On the image on the right, you can see some of those design requirements for a commercial structure, the principal entrance location at the front there, the minimum transparency, which is where the windows are, and then the location of parking in regard to the location of the street. And for residential districts, we've also included some anti-monotony standards to ensure that all the buildings in new subdivisions are architecturally unique. And that is one thing that I really wanted to emphasize tonight, is that the Unified Development Ordinance is looking toward new development. Instead of redeveloping existing parcels, excuse me, I should say, it's really for building new things. We're not going to be changing existing development very much, but when new development comes along, that's when the Unified Development Ordinance kicks in for the new projects. And so on the next slide, we're talking about the Mill District. And the Mill District is really everyone's neighborhood. We've heard some really great feedback from the residents on River Street and hope to be able to incorporate their feedback as we continue to revise the draft UDO here. But for the Mill District, this is what we call a mixed use district. So it has a mix of commercial and residential uses there. We really want this to be an inclusive environment for everybody in town. Part of the goal here is to create great areas for walking, bring some of these commercial and mixed use buildings closer to the sidewalk. We would like to allow sidewalk seating for restaurants and cafes, removing on-site parking requirements so that there's more use of on-street parking and future surface parking lots. So there's really a lot going on there. And also, I thought this would be a good time to note that in the existing draft, single-family homes are a special use in the Unified Development Ordinance. So that's a good foundation to build on right there. On the next slide, we are talking about uses. So, districts is, where all the action is happening, but uses is what is happening in each of those districts. If you've taken a look at the UDO at this point, you've noticed that there's one big use table in the ordinance. And the purpose of that is so that you can quickly reference and compare which uses are allowed in which locations. We've just given you a snippet of what that table looks like here. This portion of the table shows commercial uses, for example. So permitted uses are marked P, special uses are marked S, and a blank space indicates that the use is not allowed in that district. We all know that uses in a community can change over time, and the purpose of updating these uses is the village is ready for those changes, building on what's been done in the comprehensive plan already. Older ordinances tend to have a more old-fashioned approach to a use list, so basically listing almost any use that you could think of. The modern approach is to talk more about uses in a general fashion, so talking about the overall impact of each use. So for example, a shoe store or a bookstore or a clothing store can all be grouped together under the same umbrella category. Here we call them retail goods establishment. You can see that on the table, since they all have the same basic impact on neighboring properties in terms of things like parking and access and landscape and that sort of thing. On the next slide, we are talking about a specific kind of use. So fences are part of that uses section. And we know that fences are a particularly important use and can sometimes be controversial. Early in the project, fences were highlighted as an important issue to address. And we did this by working closely with village staff to create the table that's shown here. Some parts of the village were built under annexation agreements that allowed for different fence heights and designs. And these agreements are beginning to expire. So as they do, the regulations in the UDO will start to take effect. People won't be required to replace their fences overnight, but as fences are slowly replaced over time, they will use these new standards in the UDO. We also wanted to note here that there are additional design standards for fences to make sure that their aesthetics are up to par in terms of material and overall design. On the next slide, we are talking about the subdivision portion of the ordinance. So, when we talk about the UDO, the two big parts of it are zoning and subdivision regulations. And the subdivision standards for the UDO really implement the transportation goals of the village that are in the comprehensive plan. The goal here is to create complete streets that work for drivers, bicyclists, and pedestrians. And the UDO includes standards for things like shorter blocks, which allow for more choices in travel routes. Shorter blocks also provide more options and reduce bottlenecks at key locations in the village as it continues to grow. The UDO also includes amenities for pedestrians to make walking safer. For example, wider roads can have pedestrian islands in the middle of them or curb extensions to shorten that crossing distance between the corners for people with young children and families with seniors. On the next slide, we just wanted to highlight two interesting things that we're doing with the subdivision standards. On the left, you can see the green infrastructure. So green infrastructure is encouraged throughout the Unified Development Ordinance, and we've worked closely with the village engineers on this. This means that streets can be built with plants that actually help capture and treat stormwater and bring it down into the soil. In addition to complete streets, the UDO includes options for conservation design. Conservation design is the image there on the right. And the subdivision like this would have the same number of lots as a typical subdivision, but it's built in a way that complements the natural contours of the land and the hydrology of the environment. It's got kind of a combination of private open space and shared open space, which is really beneficial for everyone. Next slide, please. So the next portion of the code is the off-street parking and loading. And the new parking standards in the code, we have not only minimum parking requirements, we also have maximum parking requirements as well. So minimum parking requirements have been part of zoning ordinances for decades. And they ensure that development, especially residential development, provides a minimum number of parking spaces for residents and visitors. Maximum parking requirements put a cap on the total number of parking spaces in a development so that parking eats up less square footage in our commercial areas. The ordinance also includes bicycle parking, and we know that people don't want to bike if they can't find somewhere to park. And we've seen quite a bit of interest in bike parking from some of the commercial and manufacturing businesses in town for their employees. And certainly not on a night like tonight, but hopefully as the weather gets nicer, it would be a great amenity for the village. The last thing we wanted to highlight for the off-street parking and load-in section of the code was the new requirements for pedestrian paths in parking lots. And these are going to be raised paths that connect the parking lot to the front of the store. The goal here is to ensure that the parking lots are as safe as possible for people walking as they are for the people who are driving. Okay, we just have about 2 more slides here in the overview. So landscaping. Landscaping is important for so many reasons. Stormwater management, water conservation, screening of incompatible uses, but also for community aesthetics. UDO's landscape requirements focus on tree preservation and replacement, which is required in all districts. We also want to ensure that Montgomery has a diversity of trees to protect the community from pests like the emerald ash borer. Another goal of UDO is greener parking lots with perimeter landscaping and parking island landscaping. More trees in parking lots reduces the overall urban heat island effect by providing shade and helps to absorb stormwater during big rainstorms through the root systems that are underground. And last but not least is administration and applications. So one of our big goals, as Jared mentioned, is to make the ordinance easier to administer and to understand. UDO has created a consistent procedure that serves as a framework for all of the applications in the UDO. And also for planned unit developments, PUDs, we've streamlined that procedure as well to make sure the village gets amenities from developers in return for approving the PUD. Last thing we wanted to highlight in this section was the new flow charts that are in there for each zoning applications, things like variations, special uses, amendments, to ensure that all users understand how this process works at first glance. So thank you again. I'm looking forward to talking with you more about this in the future.
Thank you very much, Jake. A couple of things that I did want to bring to the village board's attention. We did have one comment in regards to a section of the ordinance about garages, and that it was not quite clear that it meant that you're able to have a cumulative amount of 880 square feet. This was a comment brought up by a trustee, and I did want to read that the new language, which is on the UDO page, it's not in the village board packet at this time, reads the maximum cumulative size of an attached or detached garage is 880 square feet. That's what we're proposing. So trying to make that a little more streamlined, a little more clear. A couple other items that we felt were substantial changes that we just wanted to highlight. As Jake mentioned, fences are one of them. Currently, we are proposing a maximum fence height of 5 feet. There's a mix of fence heights throughout the village. There's a lot of neighborhoods that have 4 feet that are under annexation agreements and HOA restrictions. A lot of those are going to expire here very soon. So what staff and CMAP and the steering committee have been working on is trying to find somewhat of a middle ground there. So we're proposing 5 feet. So you would, and then for the people who already have a 6 foot tall fence, they would certainly be able to maintain that fence. However, if they came in for a full new permit or removal and replacement, what we're proposing is that 5 feet is the maximum. So that's certainly something that we want to make sure that the board's aware that we're proposing. Jake kind of went over some of the green initiatives. This would include following landscaped areas must include depressed planters and bioretention and infiltration areas to assist in water quality protection and facilitate groundwater recharge. There's a tree canopy coverage item that Jake also discussed. And the pedestrian circulation. We also, in an attempt to get more public outreach and drive people to the UDO site, staff sent out a survey. So that survey is not meant to be scientific. We just wanted some input, and we wanted to drive people, as I mentioned, to that UDO portion of the website. But I did want to go over the results. As I mentioned, certainly not scientific. We didn't request any information from the applicants besides just their answers. In regards to fence heights, about 15% of people liked the 4-foot tall fences, another 16% liked 5 foot, and about 65% liked 6-foot tall fences. What do you consider if and when purchasing a fence? The majority of people, about 35% said privacy, 32% said pets, 13% said aesthetics, and 8% said cost. And the total responses on most of these questions are right around a little over 400. What fence material is appropriate for homes in residential areas? 87%, and this was a select all that apply answer. 87% said wood, 38% said metal, wrought iron, and then 15% said chain link. How many potential sheds should be allowed on a residential property? 6% said 0, 77% said 1, and 16% said 2. Don't worry, there are only 7 questions. What do you feel should be the maximum size of a residential shed? 31% said 100 square feet, 50% said 200, and 16% said larger than 200 square feet. Which would you consider a priority for Montgomery? And select all that apply. And so we had a lot of responses for increasing bike paths and increasing sidewalk connectivity. And then lastly, what is your opinion regarding the use of temporary signs? Are you supportive? 26% said yes. Are you supportive in limited numbers? 41% said yes to that. Indifferent, we had 23% for indifferent, and then 8% for shouldn't be allowed at all. With that, I'd ask if there are any questions.
I have some
Eric,
questions.
I have several questions.
Go ahead, Teresa.
So this Unified Development Ordinance, is this something that would you call this more of a process to kind of clean up our ordinances? Or is this almost like a product that can be applied to different municipalities across the Chicagoland area that have maybe messier ordinances? I'm just trying to get clear. Is this something that CMAP is looking to do for a bunch of municipalities, or is this just like a process specific to us?
Yeah, so I apologize that wasn't made a little clearer at the onset. So this is an ordinance that would replace the village's current zoning ordinance, replace the subdivision control ordinance, and several sections of the municipal code. So this is definitely, and the CMAP team can feel free to chime in, this is definitely a Montgomery specific project. This is something that we had set up a steering committee to go through. Now, CMAP is engaged with a number of other communities to do similar projects, but the LTA grant opportunities range to far more than just unified development ordinances.
Okay.
I can chime in there if you like, Jared. Trustee Sperling, actually, Jared hit the nail on the head. We help out communities throughout the 7-county region, but this effort over the last 2+ years has definitely been Montgomery specific. We've worked with other communities on zoning and subdivision regulations in the past. We'll be doing so in the future, but everything in this ordinance is catered and tailored to the needs of your community. And we're proud of that.
Okay, thank you. So then with the idea of reducing the number of types of residential zoning, I guess I'm not clear why, we had the folks there in the public comments talking about, their houses were going to be rezoned to commercial. I'm not clear on why that would even happen. Are we looking to extend the Mill District, down the street?
That's exactly correct, Trustee Sperling. It's an effort to match the zoning ordinance up with the land use plan. The land use plan designates their properties as part of the Mill District. So that's what we were trying to match up with. The new UDO would zone their properties as proposed Mill District to relate directly to the comprehensive plan. I think the comments that were mentioned earlier that when we would have actual development pressure, or say somebody comes in and wants to redevelop that block, purchase those properties and do a mixed use Mill District type development, that might be a more appropriate time to look at zoning. But we're going to go through the process of talking with those property owners, show what could be included through Laura's redrafting of a portion of the UDO and talk about that as an option. But in all likelihood, we might just look at it as an area where we would leave the zoning as is and come back at a later date when there was actual development proposal to look at rezoning those properties as part of a PUD.
Okay, yeah, because that wasn't clear to me, at the beginning when we were hearing the comments. I wasn't aware of any of that.
Right.
And I would think that those properties would be grandfathered in because I believe the one lady said the home has been there for a significant amount of time. So I don't understand why they wouldn't be. I just wasn't clear on the push to change the zoning. That's all.
Yeah, and if I could speak to that really quick, what the issue became was, yes, even if they were rezoned right now, they would become a legal non-conforming, which means the homeowners would be able to keep using the home as residential, but there would be certain triggers. There might be limitations on how much they could expand a deck, or they could replace things in kind, but if they wanted to do new improvements, there might be certain limitations. And that's exactly now what we are going back to research is whether or not there's certain, we can grandfather it in even further, or whether or not it's appropriate to proceed is legal non-conforming versus special use versus, staff reconsidering the recommendation. So, those are all on the table right now. The members of those homes, appeared at the Plan Commission, and the Plan Commission was very concerned and did take those comments very seriously, which is why we're working. But I do want to make clear that it was never the intent that these houses would immediately be used as commercial. There would be certain rights no matter what to continue using the house as residential. The question was just the scope of what that would entail.
Okay. I think I personally have a lot more questions on that. I will hold them because I know that you all are still going to work through this. But thank you. I'll hold them until I get more information, but thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Sperling. And I believe Trustee Youngerman had something he needed to.
Yeah, for about 10 minutes. In the slides that were presented, and Trustee Sperling touched on this, it shows the Mill District and the uses there. And so, and Attorney Julian had touched on this. So if they are changed, they go from residential to Mill District, they're now a non-conforming use in Mill District. If those homes are rezoned, they would require a special use to do anything that a residential home would do. It doesn't make any sense at all. None.
Well,
That's one of my three questions.
If I may, we currently, in the creation of the mill district, have.
Take your mask off, please, so everyone can hear.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know.
All right, so I will speak closer to the mic for you.
That works too.
So in the creation of the mill district approximately 10 years ago, there were very similar scenarios that single-family homes, and those homes have been rezoned to mill district back at that point in time. Some of them are located just behind us here on Main Street. They were certainly not forced to change use. They have been able to operate under the mill district use for 10 years.
Would the rezoning raise their taxes?
So this is something that's always challenging. I have run several comparisons for the homes behind us here, and there's a mixed result. A lot of them, though, have not been raised. There is an example of a home, and I only pulled a few as examples. There's one that certainly did see an increase. Now, as you know, Attorney Julian pointed out to me in a subsequent conversation, this is always difficult because I don't know if there are exemptions on the property that went away. Taxes are an interesting thing that don't stay stagnant.
And this is all, I mean, these are good questions. These are items that will be part of the discussion that you and our attorney present on the 18th.
Well, I have two other questions that aren't associated with any of those items. And another one of we talked about garage size, and I think you mentioned 880 square feet. So you're telling me if I own 5 acres in the village of Montgomery and I have a 3,000 square foot house and I have I want to build a garage or something or an outbuilding, that the maximum I can do is 880 square feet?
That is what we're proposing. Currently, it's 800 square feet, about approximately 4 cars.
So why if it's, and I get it for a certain size parcel, but if I've got 5 or 10 acres, why can't it be based upon permeability as far as the permeability of the land up to a maximum square footage of something?
So that is definitely something that the staff, CMAP team, steering committee all did discuss. We talked about a 2-tiered system where if you were over X amount of square feet or acreage that you went to a separate. Ultimately, the steering committee decided to move forward with a single standard. Once again, that's something that the village board can alter.
That's a good question. So do we have residential properties currently zoned residential or will that are large enough in size where a detached structure that we would fall into this part of the code is, 4 cars is more than enough for anybody that lives in downtown or on the west side of town or on the east side of town in a residential neighborhood. But if you're zoned agricultural, let's say, does that standard still apply, or are they really exempt from that standard?
So agricultural is a little different scenario. They fall under different accessory structures. If I'm not mistaken, I'd have to do a little more digging in the code off the top of my head. But we do have some residential parcels that are existing, especially just east of the river, that are substantially larger than any parcel that's on the west side of, say, Orchard Road.
And one of those properties is exactly why I asked that question.
I was going to ask a similar question related to the size of a shed. If you have a 2-acre parcel, you're telling me you can have the same size shed that I could put in my home in Lakewood Creek at
Yes.
200 square feet?
That's ridiculous.
That is
It's utterly ridiculous. I mean,
that is the current ordinance requirement. We are not proposing a change. We
So
can't-
can you guys look at that? I mean, that's an interesting thought, and I don't want to trip up the process here. Can you look at that for, is there and I know the steering committee looked at this, and I know we're looking at this kind of at the end, but that's kind of the process, is if you're on an acre lot, like the zoning, your residential zoning should be just slightly different because you do have much more land area there. I mean, was there consideration given to that?
Oh, absolutely, especially in the case of garage, not as much in the case of sheds, but definitely in the case of garage, there was a substantial amount of consideration given.
Will you guys take a look at that? And if you have any additional information that you can provide the board ahead of the next meeting, because that's something that, I mean, I'm trying to see this play out, right? We approved the UDO, somebody is illegal non-conforming use, let's say on the east side of the river down here, and they want to put up an accessory structure, they're required to come back through us. You know, what'll probably happen is they won't know that they're not allowed to do it, and so they'll order their garage or their shed. Then they'll get stopped by our building department. Then they'll come back to us asking for a variance, which we'll have to grant or we'll feel compelled to grant because of that. So if you could kind of, I'm sure you put a lot more thought into it than just our questions tonight for first blush. But if you can look at that, either provide a memo from the CMAP folks or from you ahead of the next meeting or whatever.
Absolutely. We actually had draft language written and that we decided to remove. We'd be happy to look back at that language. And in reference to your example, we've actually had that happen about now 11 years ago or so. When I first started, we've had a very similar scenario.
I remember that. To get by that, they had to build some sort of a, do you remember that? Like a covered walkway from the house to the garage, so it wasn't considered, I mean, so you do what you do. Let's not go back. So let's just try and figure out a way that avoids that situation in the future.
Well, I still have another question.
I'm not saying you don't. Go ahead.
And on your fence survey, was PVC or white vinyl not an option?
I thought we had that. If not, that is certainly something that we are proposing to include
Because
in the
I
ordinance.
know a lot of residents have expressed interest in that because of the ease of maintenance.
I'm pretty sure that it was part of the,
I don't remember
doing the
hearing
survey.
him- I don't remember hearing him say it, though.
It was part of this, it was part of the survey.
Okay.
Yeah,
All right.
it doesn't show up on my results. I apologize. I'll have to look into it, but this is something that we're proposing now to include. Absolutely.
All right,
Yes.
thank you. See, that was the easy
Anything
question.
else?
Can I have a third of trustee Youngerman's questions? Thank you. Fences. You gave some statistics on response rate. What were the total responses?
413 on, 414.
Okay, thank you. I have follow-up if I'm allowed. You had talked about the response rates for the 4 foot, 5 foot, 6 foot. Overwhelmingly, the response rate was for the 6 foot fence, but the recommendation coming out of committee is for the 5 foot fence. Can you just speak to that a little bit, please?
Absolutely. So this is something that I'm very glad to engage in a conversation with, because this is something that staff and the steering committee talked about. Ultimately proposed the 5 foot because we do think it's a little bit more of a middle ground than 6 or 4. We feel that it's a little bit easier for people with larger dogs to keep them maintained within that space. We also feel that it is a little more neighborhood friendly. You can see just a little bit above a fence to know if something's on the other side, or it doesn't also give you that kind of wall effect if it's on a corner side yard like some of the existing 6 foot fences do. Those were all the things that were taken into consideration. But as I mentioned, I greatly desire a conversation regarding this with the village board, because ultimately it will be something that staff and the village board will hear about. We will engage with the public regardless of what this fence height is. But I do want to make sure that you're aware of that proposed change.
Thank you.
Is it possible at that next meeting to dive into that with the board? The fences, the annexation agreements, what they are now, what we're proposing, because we're all going to get these calls, and because that's a hot button issue.
Oh, 100%.
It would be good for us to have weigh in before we vote and buy in on this. So that would be helpful.
And tell which ones or when all of them end. I think one you said is 2 years. Would you get all of them and tell us when they all end? And to go to 400 people, 400 people could be a husband and wife. Is that correct? Doing it?
Oh, this survey, as I mentioned, was not scientific. This could
Right.
be.
It wasn't, it was
one
strictly
person.
online, strictly online.
It was strictly.
But
online.
if we want to go to a statistically valid survey, it's dollars. How much do you want to pay for that input? And
Right.
it's significant dollars. So it's just a consideration. There's a mechanism to that we don't have the staff or the expertise to administer the survey at that kind of level with a population of our size. So
I
just a
agree, but
thought.
we don't have to take what 400 people said, if they're all in one area, like
Absolutely, which is.
Huntington, and nobody else in like the downtown area said anything, then
Right,
how
but-
can we take this as being golden?
Well, I'm not sure it's taken as being golden, but unless you're willing to pay for a statistically
No,
valid
no.
survey, you put it out there and give everyone the opportunity to weigh in. We have folks who came here tonight to weigh in. So the people who choose to participate in the process that we put forward are the voices that you have to give credence to some of that input. I'm not saying it's golden or the rule for the whole of the community, but
Is it possible, though, that in the case of this questionnaire or study or whatever, one person could have taken it 400 times if they wanted?
And
Okay,
yeah,
all right.
you gave different answers.
I know I did it
You didn't do that,
37,
did you?
so.
So, and one thing that I would mention, and Jared, you mentioned this before you talked about the survey, is that it's a non-technical survey. Really, the goal of the surveys was to reach out to residents to kind of encourage them to be part of the process.
Drive interest.
And to have 400 residents, that might be more people than voted in our last consolidated election. So really, I think that that's pretty decent considering. But again, it's not golden. I mean, it's something that we'll deliberate here. We've had experience for the CMAP folks, as you probably are aware at this point. The majority of this board has either served on Plan Commission for a number of years or has gone to those meetings for their entire career. So we're maybe a little bit more in depth at this level than you might normally see. So I do appreciate
I have
putting up with us. Go ahead.
to kind of dovetail into what Denny was talking about with knowing when the annexation agreements expire, and to clarify, because earlier you made a statement related to annexation agreements and HOAs.
Yes.
And I want it to be very clear to the public, because we've run into this problem, that annexation agreements, HOAs, and village code are often in conflict, and we need it to be very clear to the public which is law. Because again, village code might say 5 feet, and somebody's going to hear that, order and install their 5-foot fence, and their HOA is going to have a 4-foot restriction. So we need to make sure that we're clear as far as what HOAs are governing areas, what those rules are. I would like, at that discussion, I would like to see that information. I'd like to have that as a quick reference tool that I think we discussed previously, having what annexation agreements are, what HOA rules are, and what the village code are, so we can clearly define the conflicts in advance and try to stop that from happening. Because as you know, we allow somebody to put in a 6-foot fence for a special use, we give them a variance for it. And the next thing you know, Bob down the block sees Dan put up a 6-foot fence and he calls and orders one too, not understanding the process. So I think to help us avoid the conflict in the future, it would behoove us to just be very clear as far as what those rules are and how they spell out.
Absolutely. I can certainly provide that information.
And it might not hurt to invite the HOAs to that meeting, to let them know of that meeting. So, because again, this is something that they battle with on a daily basis, just like we do. You
That's
you
a good
guys are
idea.
all in the crosshairs.
If they haven't been involved or at least made aware of that, maybe it's something that we can see if there's any interest. Those HOA boards deal with this. And I don't mean to cut anybody else off. Trustee Guyer, do you have any thoughts? Denny? Steve?
I have another question.
That's what we're doing.
He's out of questions. I'm sorry, folks.
The item for separate action, the one we started originally discussing, item A, recommendation of the Plan Commission on PC, blah, 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 blah. All we're doing is accepting the fact that they made a recommendation.
Yes.
Okay.
Good
I see
clarification.
Laura shaking her head, so, okay, thank you.
All right. Doug? Anything
No,
else?
but I would like the public to be clear that that's what that is, that accepting the recommendation is strictly that we acknowledge that the planning commission met, talked, took the time to do it, and we're recognizing that. We're not accepting the recommendation. We're not taking action on it. We're simply acknowledging that they did the work.
Trustee Betzinger, anything?
Would you like a motion?
Hold on, I'm going through. I got to go to
Oh.
Teresa too.
I'm sorry, Teresa.
Teresa, do you have anything else that you want to ask tonight?
No, I'm good. Thank you.
All right. So with that, I did just want to make one comment. I appreciate the CMAP folks' involvement over multiple years on this. You know, Montgomery, as you guys know and staff knows, we've been fortunate to receive a number of LTA grants from CMAP over the last decade, let's say. Those are an amazing tool that CMAP offers municipalities all throughout the region. As this board knows, I've been serving on the CMAP board for the last 5 years, representing Kane and Kendall counties. Also sit on the MPO for CMAP as well. So, and I did want to congratulate and thank Jake for his presentation tonight and for serving this year, just starting your presidency at the helm there for the APA in Illinois. So we certainly have the cream of the crop working with us tonight. So thank you. And I haven't met Kendra before, which probably means that she did most of the heavy lifting on this. So, but
Of course she did. Of course she did.
Jared as well. We've met Jared before here. So with that, if there are no other questions or comments from staff or the board, I would entertain a motion for item A, which is again, just the recommendation from Plan Commission. It doesn't take any formal action.
So
on the
moved.
plan.
So moved.
Second.
All right, call the roll.
Trustee Marisak.
Yes.
Trustee Betzinger.
Yes.
Trustee Guyer.
Yes.
Trustee Lee.
Yes.
Trustee Youngerman.
Yes.
Trustee Spurling.
Yes.
All right, and that carries 6-0. Just for transparency, item B is ordinance 1903. That's adopting the ordinance, the UDO, and that includes the zoning map, correct?
That does not currently include the zoning map. That will come with a later recommendation. They are
Got it.
separate items.
But
that
we will approve them all on the same evening.
That is our desire, is
Okay.
to have them approved at the same time.
All right, so obviously this will not be on consent. At a future meeting, it will be up for discussion. Thank you. All right, thanks, CMAP.
Thank you all.
All right, I'll move on to item C this evening, Resolution 2021-003, authorizing the use of 2020 MFT funds for snow removal. Dr. Wolf?
Thank you, President Bradley. So before the village board tonight is the Resolution 2021-003, authorizing the use of motor fuel tax funds for snow removal purposes. This year, the village of Montgomery did have a good surplus of salt on hand from a mild winter last year, put us in a great position. One of the other advantages that we noticed was a tremendous decrease in our tonnage prices for this coming year. So we put in a order of 1,200 tons, again, with the ability, as in years past, to have the ability to take as much as 20% over or as much as 80% of the total amount allowed. Given the prices this year, the recommendation that staff is making at this time would be for that 20% over due to the fact that prices have dropped dramatically with the onslaught of snow that we've seen lately. We've made room for that material, so we are in good shape. So that is what staff is proposing tonight. If there's any questions, I'm happy to answer those at this time.
Just to clarify, the 71-224-40 includes the 20% overage?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
All right, any other questions? Motion?
So, second.
Moved by Guyer, second by Marisak. Any further discussion? Go ahead.
Trustee Guyer.
Yes.
Trustee Lee.
Yep.
Trustee Youngerman.
Yes.
Trustee Marisak.
Yes.
Trustee Betzinger.
Yeah.
Trustee Spurling.
Yes.
Carries 6-0. Thanks, Mark. Item D this evening is 2021. It's a resolution 004 authorizing repair work in IDOT rights of way.
Thank you, President Bradley. Again, this item is kind of more of just a housekeeping item, if you will. This is a resolution that comes before the board every 2 years. Essentially, it gives us the ability to maintain our infrastructure that's located within state right away. So it's really just kind of a housekeeping item. If there's any questions, I'm happy to answer them at this time.
So moved.
Second.
Call the roll.
Trustee Marisak.
Yes.
Trustee Betzinger.
Yes.
Trustee Guyer.
Yes.
Trustee Lee. And Trustee Youngerman.
Yes.
Trustee Spurling.
Yes.
That carries 6-0. I'll give you a nickel if you remember in 2 years, just to put this on consent. Not that big a deal.
Sure, I'll get a reminder.
All right. Item E this evening, award a contract to RJ O'Neill for replacement of rooftop heating and cooling units at the Village Hall in a very large amount of money.
Thank you, President Browley. So before the board tonight is a proposal to move forward with the replacement of 2 AON rooftop units, which control the heating and cooling functions of Village Hall. In May of last year, 2020, one of our AON units experienced some failures, and mostly due to the fact that the IEPA made changes to the R22 refrigerant is no longer allowed. They started phasing that out in roughly 2010. Now in 2020, it is no longer available at all. So that's really one of the driving factors behind where we're at with this replacement. Typically, we'd be able to repair the items that were failed, but due to those changes in that refrigerant type, it's kind of put us in this situation. Included in the board's packet was also a table of cost savings. So you'll see that, as mentioned, we had 1 unit that's compromised and currently not working at full function, but we are proposing for both of those units to be replaced. In that table, you'll see there's about roughly $18,000 of cost savings by replacing that second unit at the same time. So that's a large part of the reason why we would like to propose moving forward with both of those units, as well as the fact that obviously we're seeing malfunctions in the equipment on the 1 unit. So we suspect that obviously failures will be forthcoming with the other unit as well. RJ O'Neill was one of 3 contractors who were solicited for this particular project. We did not put out for an RFP, mostly due to the fact that this was an item that staff had actually put in the budget, proposed for FY22. But due to talking to Finance Director Van Voorn, it's come to my attention that we have some surplus funds available potentially for this year. And so we are recommending moving forward with that in this current fiscal year. Right now, the timeline that we have, we're in really good shape as far as being able to complete and commence this work before April 30th, the end of the budget year. So that would be our plan. We're about 8 to 9 weeks lead time from the manufacturer to get these units. And then obviously it leaves us a little bit of a window to pick good weather to try to do replacements. Again, those contracts were all included in the board's packet. So if there's any questions on those, I'm happy to answer them at this time. Otherwise, staff is recommending approval to move forward with RJ O'Neill for the RTU replacements of $218,822.
Director Wolf, I'm assuming these are the original, original pieces of equipment from when Village Hall was built? Yes?
Yes.
Steve, go ahead.
I've got 2 questions. The first one, has RJ O'Neill done work for the village before? No issues or anything?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. Second question, and it's kind of a, what do you think the dollar amount would have been to repair if we weren't forced now to replace because of the EPA? What?
Oh, that I can't speak to. We didn't get any quotes on that, just based on the fact that, you know, that wasn't an option for us. I can definitely get those numbers and follow up with the board on what it would be, but.
If the EPA is the one that we're no longer allowed to use this, are there any grants or anything that would pay for this because we're now being forced to change?
Not that I'm aware of, but that's definitely something we can look into.
All right.
Or some. I feel like we just moved into the building, which I'm sure most of you
I mean,
do.
it's not their money, so.
What's the timeline for the installation?
So the 8 to 9 weeks would be the lead time.
Okay.
We've already talked to the contractor, obviously pending board approval tonight. They'll be placing the order tomorrow. That will put us in the April timeframe. And then, like I said, it'll give us a few weeks of flexibility to try to target some good weather in order to proceed and get this work completed.
And this includes full installation?
Correct.
Is there a crane required for this?
Yes.
I thought so.
Is it the state EPA or federal EPA that's ban this?
I believe it's the state EPA,
Yeah, figures, another
but I'm
unfunded
not
mandate.
100% on that.
We're talking about Freon, right?
Correct.
Yeah, I think that's a federal. I think that.
Yeah, it is, yeah, I think, pretty sure it's federal. To answer your question, I have a Corvette that's 34 years old, and I knew somebody that had Freon for my air conditioning, and he said the same thing. If he didn't have this, you can't buy it anymore. So
That's
they
correct.
even eliminated with cars, everything.
It started being banned in 2010, right?
Correct.
When was this facility built, Village Hall?
205, so you had 15.
We didn't know 5 years ahead of time it was gonna go out of date. It was gonna.
But I know you share that concern.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this isn't the only facility in which we have units with that type of refrigerant. We've already had to do some upgrades to some other equipment that we've done out of our operating budget that hasn't exceeded, obviously, board approval. But there are still several more units that'll need to be attended to. The complexity, though, also of these units at this building are substantially higher than a lot of the other facilities. PD is probably a close second. But as far as most of the well houses are smaller, more comparable to residential type units, and definitely not at as great a cost as what we're looking at for these two units.
Okay. Is there a motion?
So moved. Second.
Trustee Guyer? Yes. Trustee Lee? Trustee Youngerman?
Yes.
Trustee Marisak?
Yes.
Trustee Betzinger?
Yes.
And Trustee Spurling.
Thank you. That carries 6-0. And what you heard there was 6 very frustrated yes votes on that, unfortunately. All right, moving on to item F this evening is resolution 2021-005, authorizing reduction of the performance security for the Montgomery Place Apartments. Director Young, are you summarizing this?
Yes, Mr. President.
Right, sir.
Thank you. Yes, before you tonight is a resolution to approve the reduction of the performance surety for the Montgomery Place Apartments. The original amount of surety was in the form of $1,125,000. EEI has reviewed the request for the reduction for improvements that have been put in place, and has agreed to authorize a $406,000 reduction because of completed improvements. So the new total amount that would be retained, which includes 10% of the value of the completed public improvements and 110% of the value of the remaining public improvements, would be $718,691.40. Staff recommends that the board approve this reduction.
Thanks. Any questions or a motion?
I have a question. Administrator Zofel, the shrub question that I brought up originally, that's going to be corrected, correct?
Yes, that'll be corrected.
It has been corrected?
I said it will be corrected.
All right,
I'll make the motion.
Second.
go ahead.
Trustee Lee?
Yes.
Trustee Youngerman?
Yes.
Trustee Marisak?
Yes.
Trustee Betzinger?
Yes.
Trustee Guyer?
Yes.
And Trustee Spurling.
Yes.
Thank you. That carries 6-0. Thanks, Rich. The last item for separate action this evening is resolution 2021-006, approving an agreement between the Village of Montgomery and JB Commodities LLC regarding tree preservation requirements in the Montgomery Business Center. Director Young?
Thank you, Mr. President. Tonight, this is for the Montgomery Business Center, and in order for them to make some lots very marketable that are directly across the street from the Sugar Dome, they've requested that they be approved to clear the trees that are located on the property in order to create building pads that would be used for new construction, new industrial construction. And therefore, they're asking to provide funds that would be in the form of a tree preservation requirement that's within the current zoning ordinance. What it works out to be is an amount to go into the tree preservation fund of $15,600. That's based on a calculation of 26 acres that are wooded now that equate to 2 trees per acre or 52 trees at a arborist cost of $300 per tree. That amounts to a $1,500 and $600, $15,600 payment into the tree preservation fund. And staff has reviewed this, the arborist has reviewed this, and we recommend that the board approve this resolution.
The $300 per tree, that's just the cost of the tree. That doesn't include installation, correct?
That's correct.
Well, I don't know if you heard that, but they're not installing the trees, they're just.
They would not be installing, they would be paying this into our fund to fund trees in other locations within the village.
And you just answered my second part of my question, but the $300 per tree is essentially, if we're going to go plant a tree someplace else in the village, we have $300 to spend on said tree without installation or with installation?
My understanding, it would be without installation. So in all likelihood, the trees would be installed by our public works staff.
Okay, so we're looking at probably about 2.5, 3 inch caliper tree then. Okay, thank you.
Exactly, that's correct.
Do we currently have a tree preservation fund?
I think this is the first time, at least that's my understanding, this would be the first time that somebody has paid into this fund. But we have the mechanism to obviously establish this fund and then use it in the future on some other properties.
You know, I remember just specifically discussing this parcel about 12 years ago when I was on Plan Commission, and in regards to their tree replacement requirements. It's probably the only parcel left in our village where it's so inundated with trees that if you were to go through and do a tree survey, first of all, that's going to be tens of thousands. And then their replacement requirement would be so astronomical that there would be no chance that it could develop. It's in the heart of a manufacturing and industrial district. There's no indication that the land that we're looking at here, which is hard to see from the black and white print, is any sort of ecologically sensitive area, wetlands, endangered species. I mean, there's really no, is there any indication that
I
that's
would say, Mr. President, that it is adjacent to a floodplain complex, but it is not within the floodplain, and there are a number of invasive species, I would say, in this wood stand or wood lot. So I think this is a good base for future plantings by taking out this tree stand.
And I guess just one clarification point, does this give them blanket authority to remove every tree on their properties?
Within that 26 acres, yes, sir.
Okay. So I'm going to ask the question, but I'm pretty sure I know the answer. Staff does not feel like there's any portion of this that's worth saving, like a buffer to awe-cut or anything like that?
No, I don't. Well, they'll have to come back once there is a development plan for the property and create that buffer along Awcut with new planting material. I think in the long run, you will achieve the buffer that's required in the zoning ordinance, which will now be the new UDO. So we'll have that planting requirement that will create that buffer in the future.
And none of these monies can be used for that purpose. It's a separate thing, correct?
This is a separate thing, yes, sir. Now, it's possible that, none of these monies would be used for that purpose of meeting the landscape requirements for a future development.
You're going to be getting a better quality tree and buffer, so.
Mm-hmm. I will say, and I should have said this earlier for the UDO, as somebody that reviews, ordinances, having a clear UDO on stuff like this is helpful. But I guess just for the board's sake, to remove this kind of hanging chad from a potential purchaser of these lots is a huge benefit to that property, because going into this, I'm doing this on several projects in other communities, you have no idea what the village is going to do in regards to tree replacement. It makes it hard for you, if you're reading the code, to put money into a project that's, entirely woods. So I appreciate staff. Let's assume that you guys came up with this and not, JB Commodities. So you should take all the credit for that. But thank you for doing that. It's making these parcels more likely to develop in our TIF area too, which is helpful. So thank you.
Director Young, I'm trying to look at the picture and, I can't tell which one are we looking at?
Well, this is, if you can envision where the Sugar Dome is, okay, and then go to the east across Commerce Drive, the new portion of Commerce Drive that was extended. So then you're looking at property on the far east side of these lots that are on the east side of Commerce Extended. So this directly abuts up to the building that is located between Nell Road and Alcott Road.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that.
It's worth mentioning. It would be super helpful if we could get color copies.
Jeff said his is in color.
All
I'm
right.
so happy for him.
I appreciate it. Any other questions on this? Is there a motion?
So move.
Second.
Moved by Lee, second by Youngerman. Go ahead and call the roll.
Trustee Lee?
Yes.
Trustee Youngerman?
Yes.
Trustee Marisak?
Yes.
Trustee Betzinger?
Yes.
Trustee Guyer?
Yes.
And Trustee Spurling?
Yes.
That carries 6-0. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right, moving on, we have 2 items for discussion this evening, and the first item is a liquor license request from Gray's Mill Estates, and had I thought about this an hour and a half ago, I would have taken this out of order, do this one earlier, so I sincerely apologize, Mr. Cullen. But with that, I'll turn it over to Jeff. You can give us an introduction here, and we'll move forward.
Yes, this should be relatively quick. Normally, I come to you with these and say, we're looking for some feedback on you if you want to move forward, not move forward, need more information. I feel with the discussions we've previously had about this property, I know your feelings on that. So I just wanted to let you know that Attorney Julian and I are working with the petitioner to figure out, we need to get some questions about their internal structure to figure out, is it one liquor license? Is it multiple liquor licenses? Will they fit in one we have? Do we need to create a different one? So we are going to be working on that, and then we'll bring it back to you. In the meantime, if there are any things that you want to make sure are included, are not included, things like that, if you could let Attorney Julian or I know, so we can work that into what we're doing. And then once we have something, we will bring it back to you.
Any objections to that? It may require a different type of liquor license that we don't have. It may fit under the ones we do have. But I know that staff and Jeff are going to work through this quickly. Again, it's another thing to get checked off the list for that historic property, so.
I'd suggest trustee Tuesdays, but
Not all the trustees. All right. Any objections?
One
No.
quick question.
Go ahead.
Question. The VFW has to have a special license for Montgomery Fest outside, right?
I believe they do, yes.
Because it's only inside. I'd hate to see these guys have to have one every time they have something outside. You understand? I think it's.
Yeah, and that's what we're going to take into consideration as we're doing this. And that's why it may be a new category of license.
Right.
That's a really good comment. Can you make a note that if there are others that we approve on an annual basis like that's a bricks and mortar development, the VFW is perfect for that. Because I want to say we did this for Dixon Merst, where they now have a temporary liquor license that they can get every year without having to come to the board. I guess they don't have to come. They don't have to come anyway unless they're requesting a waiver of fee, right? We can approve that administratively for a temporary special use. Yeah, never mind that. But you get the point. Thanks.
We have to go through the process of approving VFW every year.
If it's a temporary, we can approve it at the staff level. If they're
outdoor,
requesting
okay.
a waiver of fee, the board has to approve that, I believe.
Okay.
Thanks. Thanks, sir. All right, last item for discussion this evening is the IRP traffic calming and stop sign discussion. Engineer Wallers, it's great to see you.
Village President, Village Board, nice to see everybody in person. Give me 1 second.
Chris, I couldn't recognize you with your mask on. I was wondering who was sitting so close to Mark all night. Thanks for coming.
Okay. So first of all, just to comment on the previous tree item, just you may recall that when we did the preliminary plan for that Montgomery Business Center, we did get endangered species sign off and the historic preservation sign off. So that was taken care of some time ago. So.
Okay, thanks.
So this year's IRP, we're going to be doing some work in the Mayfield Drive area and also in the downtown area on River and Webster. So we wanted to talk about a few improvements that we thought would be worthy of consideration. We envision that the discussion may go more than one meeting, so we wanted to go through everything this evening, and then if there's things that we can get opinions on and get some consensus on, it'd be helpful. If it has to wait till the next meeting, we totally understand that. So as you guys already have met Chris, and he'll be giving part of this presentation tonight as well. So we'll start with what we're going to be talking about. We've got a number of items on Mayfield, the traffic study recaps that we've done over a period of time. We wanted to give you some traffic calming options if that's a direction that we would like to go, something to consider. We also looked at stop signs on Mayfield Drive as part of this review, and then we'll talk about next steps for Mayfield. And then we have a break, and then we talk about Webster River Street. We want to talk about a stop sign at River and Webster, and then some River Street crosswalks and crosswalks at the intersection of Mill and River and Webster and River. And then we'll just follow up with any questions you may have, and then we'll talk about next steps for River Street as well. So the Mayfield Drive speed issue has been around for quite some time, and we've looked at it a number of times, and we kind of have a continuing process of evaluating Mayfield Drive. The first time that we looked at it was in 2008. We did traffic studies in that year, chronicled the volume. The average daily traffic was 1,747 vehicles per day. The 85 percentile speed was 30 miles an hour. Generally, the 85 percentile speed is considered what people are comfortable driving on any road at. So when you do set speed limits, that's usually the driving force and why you set a speed limit. So 30 miles an hour was the 85 percentile speed. However, because of the amount of concern we had on that roadway, we went through the strict IDOT methodology for establishing speed limits. And it does allow you in an urban section to reduce the speed by 5 miles per hour if you have a certain amount of driveways per block. And so we were able to take that reduction. And so we ended up setting a legal speed limit at 25 miles per hour for Mayfield Drive. That's the reason it was set there. We think that gives us some additional flexibility for the police department to issue tickets if it has a lower starting speed limit. So that's how that came about. The other recommendations that came out of that study were to add additional speed limit signs and to encourage more enforcement of traffic speed on that roadway, and then also to continue to monitor it, which we have been doing for quite some time.
So in 2014, the police department used their equipment to have additional speed information. And we'll have a compilation of the statistics, but generally you'll see that this is pretty consistent. 66% was 25 miles per hour or under. 28% was between 26 and 30 miles an hour. 5.4% 31 to 35, and then we had 0.4% above 36 miles per hour. So that was again in 14. We then did another study in 2018. Same type of information. You can see that it has changed a little bit. The speed under 25 went to 15%, 59%, 26 to 30. 23%, 31 to 35, and then 1.9% over 36. And I'm just going to move through the other studies that were done. And Chris, I don't know, we didn't get average daily traffic at those times? Okay. So we did at the last one, we'll comment on that in the last study. And again, in 2019, we did another speed study. We did some targeting in that area, and the counts were done at two separate periods for 15 days each. This was pre-Galena Concord signal. We wanted to see what the impact would be if once that signal went in to see if it affected cut through. ADT was 2,500 vehicles per day. The westbound traffic and the eastbound traffic were pretty well balanced. The 85 percentile speed was 30. Average speed was 27, and the posted speed limit was 25, obviously. And then after the signal went in, you can see that the traffic went down slightly. The average daily traffic went down to 2240. The speed, the west and eastbound is still pretty balanced. 85 percentile speed at 30, average speed 27, and then obviously the posted speed. So the conclusion was that we saw with the installation of the traffic signal about 11% reduction in traffic on Mayfield. So I think the signal did have impact. It allowed people to make a safe left turn onto Galena Road, and they didn't feel that they needed to cut through the on Mayfield Drive. 25-mile-hour speed limit was 32%, 26 to 30, 50%, 31 to 35, 15, and then over 36 miles an hour, 1.5%. What staff, staff reviewed it, and this would be the police department, public works, engineering, and administration, when we looked at this, what we believe is that we don't see a statistical speeding problem per se, but what we do recognize is that there's a lot of volume out there. Now, the volume on Mayfield is not unprecedented for this type of street. To put it in perspective, Briarcliff is a similar type of street, a mini collector with driveways, and it has about the same ADT. And Chris, you remember what the exact amount is? Yeah, it's 3,000. So it's 3,000 cars per day. So pretty similar. So then we wanted to give a summary of the data over a period of 2008 to 2019. And again, what we see is that statistically, we don't see that there's a speeding problem at Mayfield, but we do recognize that 1% or 1.7% of a larger volume of traffic does reflect a number of cars that are exceeding the 36-mile-an-hour speed. The police department has also done quite a bit of work out there, and I'm going to let Deputy Chief Sanders comment on the police activity, but I'll just give some studies or some summary of the work they've done. So they've conducted a number of special traffic enforcement patrols on Mayfield, and honestly, that's there to try to encourage people not to speed by intercepting speeders. And they've been responsible for providing the equipment to do the speed studies that we've done in 14, 18, and 19. And obviously, we've had increased visibility there. So I'm going to maybe just stop there and let Deputy Chief Sanders make any comments that he would like.
Can I ask one question? Those speed studies, the 3 speed studies that were mentioned, actually there was 4, I think, right? Or no, 3 speed studies. Yeah, there was 4. Are those all done with the speed trailer? Or have we, in 19, did we implement the new nondescript method?
You got a microphone?
Oh.
I think there is.
Hello.
There you
That
go.
better?
Much better.
Okay. In 2014, that was with the equipment we had, but in 2018, we had the equipment specifically purchased to get traffic counts and speeds. One covert, I guess, which you really wouldn't notice, but that tracks these speeds, dates, and times and give us much more specific data. So in 2018 and 2019 is when we've used that data. Prior to that, again, the radar trailer and traffic counts in that regard.
Armando, do you recall what year we did that? Remember we did that zero tolerance?
Yes, I do recall that.
I
And
know
I
that was
recall a
fun.
judge saying, we're done doing that. Because that was actually part of it. It was after 2008 and 2010 is when we were really took a zero tolerance approach to the speeding. And we're writing anything over 1, 2, 3 miles an hour until those tickets went to court and then the judge advised we're done doing that. Because of the complaints the other way. Unfortunately, most of the people speeding are our own residents because they know the area and they're looking for the cut throughs. We understand the concerns of the people that live there, obviously, the quality of life, and we respect everything that they bring to our attention. So we've done these and worked with EEI, and they did a great job of gathering this stuff together. But after that year, we went down not writing so much, but trying more education. And what we've tried to do is like education, enforcement, and to this point now we're at engineering. What can we do to change the patterns? But what I would agree in the end, what we saw was a volume problem more than a speeding problem. That doesn't say people don't speed, because they do everywhere. And I know Pete mentioned Briarcliff. That's another one too, where if we're there, certain date, certain time, someone sees us, absolutely they slow down. But unfortunately, with the limited resources, we can't be everywhere. But when we do these specific details, we gather counts and all that. Also note that in 2014, quotas were banned for police agencies. So we couldn't say, hey, go write tickets on Mayfield Drive. This last year too, we've dealt with COVID like everyone else. So in that regard, some of the traffic activity wasn't as high, but again, officers weren't out of the cars as much either. So overall, we've seen that, I think, especially here in Mayfield, the volume is what's driven more of the problems, but we are still out there. We're still trying to be as much of a presence. But part of that is when people say, be out there, you'll see people will obey when the police are out there. We can't be out there all the time. And if we're there for a predictable time, then you will have compliance just for that time. So that's where we are with that. But I think, again, EEI has done a good job of coming up with some possible solutions moving forward. So if there's any questions after that, I can.
I have a couple comments, and I went out and I've sat on, I got the radar gun from the chief or from Reisdorf, and he showed me how to use it. And I went out there and I let the PD know if I'm going to sit on a street, I let them know, hey, this is where I am. This is the time that I'm doing it. I'm writing my speeds and stuff down. And so I sat on Mayfield sometime this summer, and by definition, I can't remember, it was over 50% of the vehicles were speeding. But I see Mayfield Drive, there are 2 issues on Mayfield Drive. There's a speeding issue, but there's also a cut-through issue. And if you solve the cut-through issue, it doesn't solve the speeding issue, because 2 of the worst speeders that I saw, one of them pulled in the driveway across from me, and one of them pulled down the street. I got outed because some woman said, who's the guy in the orange shirt running radar on whatever, on Mayfield and another. And the reason I call the police and let them know, hey, this is what I'm doing, is because someone called in and said there was a guy with a gun on Mayfield. Well, it was a gun. It happened to be a radar gun. So the PD knew, and Cody showed up, and I was having some problems with the radar gun, and he showed me and corrected it. But I see two issues. There's a cut-through issue, and there's a speeding issue. And if you solve the cut-through issue, it doesn't necessarily solve the speeding issue. If I had my vote would be to install at least a couple stop signs along Mayfield, because we're seeing in our traffic count, wherever that graph was, if we go back a little bit, our average daily traffic count, it didn't go down that much. I would have hoped that it would have gone down more once that signal had been installed. But I think a lot of people are now are using that. The other thing, if you go to shut down Mayfield at Concord, which that's fine, I'm in favor of that too. If you shut that down, you've got to check with the fire department to see if potentially that causes any issues with response time. So I believe that there is an issue there. And the reason I believe that is because I've gone out there and I've actually sat on the street and I've written down the speeds and stuff. I think there should be stop signs, at a minimum stop signs. And if we're going to do speed tables, make them wide and make them high.
All right, so we're gonna go.
Yeah, I was
through
gonna say.
The options.
Thank you for reading ahead and voting before the end of the presentation. But why don't you keep going and we'll all discuss afterwards.
I'm all about efficiency.
I also do remember the call for the person with the gun on Mayfield. That was Steve.
So we are going to, Chris is gonna do the, go through the different options that we have available on Mayfield. So Chris, I'll let you take it and I'll just try to keep up with you here.
Okay, so we're going to go through just a variety of traffic calming options, and this is kind of from the ITE manual. So chicanes, choker, center islands, raised intersections, speed humps, speed tables, one-way street, and then a full road closure. So the first one is chicane, which basically is just kind of like an S-curve, some sort of a way so people aren't going straight anymore. So some of the pros with that would be there's limited impact to the surrounding properties. It does provide opportunity for landscape beautification islands, moderate cost, $10,000 to $15,000. Some of the cons of that would be the data that the IT has says that it does have limited impact on speeds. People get comfortable enough to just drive their normal speed unless you really, tighten it down. There's very minimal impact on volume diversion. And then, depending on where we would put it in, there would be some impact to on-street parking, probably fairly minimal, but still some impact. Next one would be chokers, which the village already does have some in that area. So the pros with that would be, again, relatively moderate cost, able to install within the existing street profile, does encourage lower travel speed depending on how much you choke it down. So the cons of that would be generally applicable at mid-block locations. There is some, depending on how much you choke it down, like the top picture obviously is an extreme case going down to a one-lane road. The bottom picture is taken at Concord, so that really doesn't slow anyone down. You probably need to choke people down a little bit more than that if you were to go with that option. There is some impact on snow removal, depending on where we would put it in, could impact some people's driveways. And then, if you do go the extreme, down to one lane, obviously the possibility of head-on collisions. Next would be center islands. Again, moderate cost, able to install within the existing street profile, provides opportunity for landscape islands. But the kind of cons of that would be similar to the chicanes, where limited impact on volume, depending again, how much you choke it down, how skinny you make the lane a little bit. No significant impact on speeds. And then you'd have to find a location, obviously, where would try to do little impact to someone's driveway. So they're able to go left or right out of their driveway, basically. Raised intersections would be essentially speed tables, but at an intersection. So this has significant reduction on through movements at the intersection. Would be able to install within the existing street profile. There is a relatively high cost associated with those. There is impact on snow removal and emergency vehicles. Little data available on speed, on volume dispersion and the IT studies that they did. And then typically mid-block speed reduction is less than 10% and sometimes even increases mid-block. Next one would be speed humps, which, moderate cost depending on how many are installed. The speed reduction of 25 to 30%, depending on available other routes, volume will reduce depending on how many speed humps you put in. The cons of that would be speed increase between the humps. Generally, there's impact on emergency vehicles and snow removal operations, and then obviously impact to the people who don't live on Mayfield that would have to, traverse through those. Speed tables would have a great speed reduction, 20 to 25%. When used in, multiple in series, traffic volume does reduce by 20%. Again, the cons to that would be relatively high cost, impact on emergency vehicles and snow removal operations, and then impact to residential property access. So we'd have to kind of strategically figure out where we want to put it in so that people, obviously can't put it in front of someone's driveway. The next one would be a one-way, picking a one-way direction or making it a one-way street. This is a relatively low cost to do. It's basically signage, and in this case, you kind of block one direction with an island. There is significant impact on volume reduction, obviously generally reducing the volume by half. There is impacts to surrounding residents depending on which direction you would make one way. Very little impact on traffic speeds, and then would need to be enforced, and we would have to, survey the residents to try and figure out which direction we'd want to make one way if we went this way. And then the last option would be to do a full closure. So there's moderate cost associated with that. Obviously, that has a significant impact on volume reduction depending on where we were to make the closure. Kind of the cons to that would be, again, impact to surrounding residents, little impact on traffic speeds, impacts on snow plowing and emergency access, and then would need to be enforced. So those are kind of a summary of a variety of traffic calming options. There's also, you can combine certain parts of all these into one whole thing if you wanted. You could do some of each one of these things, basically. You don't have to pick just one. So then outside of these traffic calming options, we also conducted some multi-way stop studies we did traffic counts at 3 intersections, and then did not do traffic counts at the last one, but did review intersection site distance. So we did traffic counts at Mayfield and Roxbury, Mayfield and Hageman, and Mayfield and Amsterdam Circle, and then looked at intersection site distance at Mayfield Drive and the other Amsterdam on the west side. So this is a map that shows the 4 areas where we did the stop sign studies and traffic counts. So the first location was Mayfield and Roxbury. So there was 409 vehicles on Mayfield Drive, 8 vehicles on Roxbury. No warrants are met for multi-way stop sign, and it does meet the intersection site design requirements. The next one was Mayfield Drive and Hageman Lane. again, 183 vehicles were on Mayfield, 10 vehicles turning off Hageman. The warrants were not met for multi-way stop sign, and intersection did meet site distance requirements. For Mayfield and Amsterdam, 172 vehicles on Mayfield Drive, 13 vehicles on Amsterdam. So similar to the other intersections, again, this did not meet warrants for the multi-way stop sign and did meet intersection site distance requirements. The last intersection, we chose not to do traffic counts, assuming that they were similar to the other 3 intersections, which did not meet the warrants. And then the intersection did meet the site distance requirements as well. So Pete's going to talk about some of the next steps on Mayfield Drive.
Yeah, so we'd like to just go through, what we've presented here. And the first is to talk about whether we should move forward with any of the Mayfield Drive traffic calming measures or the volume reduction measures that were discussed. And one thing I want to caution the board about is that other communities have embarked on installing traffic calming measures in residential areas. And they found that if they get a small contingent of residents that come forward and are adamant to get traffic calming and they go and install those, that they may find, and they have found in some communities, that there's been an overwhelming concern by the other residents then to reacting to the traffic calming devices that were installed. So in other words, if you put in a series of speed bumps and you have to drive that way every night to get home, you may not be too thrilled to have to go through that all the time. So they highly recommend that if you're going to embark on installing any physical improvements, that we get neighborhood buy-in up to 80%, so that we know that the neighborhood is in favor of those traffic calming devices. For example, just think about this. I think we're pretty confident that if we did a one-way street, that we would see a volume reduction, right? But if I need to go to Aldi's, and it so happens that I have to now go all the way to Galena Road and then come around to Aldi's, I may not be happy about that, right? So, or vice versa. So all I'm saying is if we decide that it's the right thing to do to move forward with traffic calming measures, I think we need to really elicit some commentary from the residents. Now, it's particularly difficult in this COVID time to have public meetings and to get input, but that would be the one caution that we would make. The other thing that I want to also caution, and you guys have heard this from me in the past, is that the manual on uniform traffic control devices in Illinois, which is the guiding document for installation of any traffic control device, such as a stop sign, yield sign, or speed limit sign, specifically indicates that stop signs are not to be used for speed control. Part of the reason for that is that if you start putting in unwarranted stop signs, people do not adhere to the sign, and you often run the risk of having a more critical accident because people may rely on that stop sign to think that people are going to stop, and the people that travel those ways understand that those signs aren't that warranted and may cruise through, and you might have a problem with a pedestrian. So, or another motorist. So we have generally tried to make sure that stop signs were warranted before we installed them, and I know you guys have heard us do it. The other thing I'll say about stop signs, we never close the book on those because we recognize conditions change. And a good example is a few months ago, we looked at a stop sign that Trustee Youngerman had asked us about, maybe it was 2 years ago, I don't remember. And we took a look at it, we sat out there, we didn't believe it was warranted. But in that 2-year period, we had gotten numerous complaints at the PD for near misses. There were other things that happened. We went out and looked at it again, and we then determined that it was warranted at that time. We keep the same open policy on all the intersections at Mayfield. If we don't have full build out there yet. And once we do, if we have, more parked cars and visibility gets limited, we'd certainly take a look at putting in stop signs if there were problems with limited sight distance because of parked cars. We haven't seen that yet. There's no accident history on Mayfield at the intersections. There is some accident history on Mayfield Drive, but not at the intersection. So that's where we're at on the intersections for the speed control. And again, we would, no matter what we do, we'd certainly continue traffic enforcement, and then, we would reevaluate in the future if conditions change for any of this, but, particularly the multi-way stops. So I'll shut up and let you guys fire away.
Real quick. Thank you. Appreciate it. Chris, thank you. Before we get started, the main reason we're talking about Mayfield today is that we are resurfacing this in a coming year, correct?
That's correct.
So
Yeah,
kind
I
of,
should have mentioned that from the beginning. And that's the reason we also want to talk about River and Webster, because we're doing some resurfacing down there too.
all right, perfect. Does anybody have anything?
Well, the comment was made that Mayfield is similar to Seasons Ridge as far as being a feeder type street. I forget the correct term.
Well, it's a mini collector, let's say.
Mini collector, thank you. The difference is Seasons Ridge has got to be darn near twice as wide as Mayfield and doesn't have nearly the street parking just because of the makeup of the neighborhood. So there's a significant difference.
Well, and I failed to mention this at the beginning. We wouldn't, can you talk real quick about how, I think we talked about this once, the configuration or the land use of Mayfield is not something that we generally like and want to do. Because the difference between Briargate and that is we got multifamily on Mayfield and a narrow road on purpose, but that multifamily has a lot more driveways in a close proximity. That's way different from Briargate. Briargate's a project I'm working on. So there's a big difference there.
Yeah, a couple comments. Generally, the narrower the street and the more parking, the slower the speeds that you will see. So normally you would expect to see slower speed limits when you had a narrower street with street parking. My reason for bringing up the two is that both streets have about the same amount of traffic, 3,000 on Briarcliff and 2,500 on Mayfield. So you have about the same average daily traffic, and you have multiple driveways that go out onto the road is the other thing. As the mayor had mentioned, our policy in about, I think it was 1999 when we started to see the start of the big development wave, was to design what we call no-load collector roadways. And so Lakewood Creek was one of the first subdivisions that went in under that standard, and Lakewood Creek Drive has that. Now, developers aren't that keen on those because it's double frontage, right? So they have to build a road through the subdivision, but then they also have to put a road to access the lot. So it's a bit of a premium for the developers. However, Village Board at that time and subsequent village boards felt very strongly that that was an important design element. And frankly, we agree, because it eliminates these types of issues, really. So on the west side of town, with the exception of the Mayfield area, we've been fortunate not to have a lot of these issues, One unique thing that happened with Mayfield and that particular development, it was a carryover from a pre-annexation agreement that predated everyone that was on staff in at that time, which I don't remember the exact year, but it had been done, circa, pre-1990, if you will. And we wanted to get a no-load collector on Mayfield, and we were unable because of that pre-existing annexation agreement or pre-annexation agreement. And actually, it went to court, and we were ordered to comply with the development proposal that the developer had put forward. So that's one of the reasons why it's configured that way and not a no-load collector like we would prefer. So, we did what we could do, but, these things were, the world's not perfect. So that's how that came about. So that's a little bit of background on some of the decision that went forward at that time.
And Doug, I didn't mean to cut you off, but
No, you didn't.
go.
No, you didn't at all. And you're right. The Briarcliff is, it's a different makeup, but I understand the correlation between the two. They're speeding. 75% of the cars going down that street are speeding based on the data. That's a lot. Now, some of them might only be going 2 or 3 miles over, but regardless, they're speeding.
Right.
There's a lot of cars. I drive that way several times a week. It's right next to my neighborhood.
Did
so
you
I-
hear that, Steve? He cuts through there.
No, I don't cut through. I use a public right of way to get to a local business establishment that built there based on accessibility. But again, and if you do go, and I'm pretty conscious because I received a letter from Chief Dan Myers back in the day, or actually I think it was Schmidt, for speeding through there during that zero tolerance policy. I received a letter from the PD that my car was seen exceeding the speed limit. So I go 20. I try to go 20 through there. The people that live there will run you over. I think the guy that you saw, I think he's honked his horn at me several times. So again, it's a lot of it is the residents are doing the speeding as well because they live there. And they know where the kids are, they know where people are. So there's a different comfort level, just like on my street. I know which houses have kids and where I need to be conscious and aware. There's a lot of cars though. It's a traffic volume problem, probably more so than that, but I don't know what the solution is. I mean, you can't close the road. I don't think you're gonna get 80% buy-in from residents to close that roadway.
Microphone.
We might be able to get 80% buy-in for speed tables.
So one thought that I had is, we've talked about this, obviously, a lot over the last 10 years. So we're going to
We've
have,
talked about this more than any other topic.
yeah. And I was highlighting that we don't really have a lot of this in town, so it's not like we're going to be doing this on every road. So there is going to be something that we need to do, I think. Probably outreach and see what the residents have to say, and then we'll decide from there. But I think we can all agree that no matter what we do, we're going to get a bench installed along the stretch. So when Steve's doing his radar, I'll have somewhere to sit. But this might be really messy, but what I would think makes sense is that we draft up, 3 preferred options. They go from, almost nothing to closing the road. In some sort of a flyer that we send to those residents and tell them we have a public meeting coming up on Zoom. We're getting pretty good at holding those. And somebody can chair that meeting and see what they have to say, because getting their input is going to be important. I hate to foreshadow something, but you will probably see that most of the residents don't want us to close the road. They do want, reduced volumes and reduced speed, but maybe we can land somewhere in the middle. Maybe we don't. But I think if we repave that road without fully going into this, as messy as it will be, we've done those residents a disservice. And to be quite honest, we're going to be dealing with it again anyway. So I'm assuming that's probably where you guys were thinking anyway.
I think it's appropriate. I mean, we've gotten enough attention, as you've pointed out over the years. I think it would be good to have some public input on what's going on out there. And we'll be happy to sit down with the police department and Public Works and talk about what we think would be an appropriate measure. And we'll try to do things that may coincide with other, advantages. For example, some of those raised crosswalks may be at key locations for bus stops, something like that, so that we can try to enhance, safety that way. But yeah, we'd be happy to do that. And then what we'd like to do is come back either at the next meeting or the following meeting and kind of give you an update on the things that we've talked about, and And then if everybody's in agreement, then we'll try to arrange for some sort of a Zoom, public input meeting, and we can think about the best way to invite people, but, work on that.
I just would put this out there that, because again, not everybody Zooms, not everybody is comfortable with that. But, we just did a non-scientific survey, but we're not talking about a large mailing to mail a similar survey
Well,
to those folks, just specifically the folks that live Roxbury, Mayfield, Amsterdam, those streets. And in conjunction with that, to get some viable data, because you can mail one per resident. I mean, you know the addresses, and it's not real difficult.
I just chuckle that you're the one that wants to do a mailer. He's all for printing and mailing. I'm just kidding.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, again, I think because you can really target this and drill it right down
I
to
agree.
them and probably get a pretty high response rate,
Well, I think that's a great idea, and I think that's the way it should be done, yes.
I think Steve with his orange, thing to go around giving every house.
They can give their honest opinion and options and feel, okay, I voted in this but I voted somewhat anonymously. So.
Yeah.
I think that makes good sense. Absolutely.
So one thing I noticed, except for the one-way street and the full closure and some of the calming options at intersections, is most of these calming options will reduce the amount of parking on that street, which is at a premium already. And then also, I would presume like the raised speed humps and things like that, you would want them on a straighter section of the road, not on a curved part of the road in case of, my concern about those is if you do have somebody that comes down there and thinks they're gonna do 40 miles an hour, they hit one of those speed bumps while they're turning and they lose control. Now we're gonna have a big mess where if they were going straight and hit one at 40 and lost control, well, at least their wheels are straight.
There's a street, Pete, on Randall. If you're going north, it's after those public houses, as far as apartments, and they have some public housing in condos. That whole street in a U is full of speed bumps. I bet you there's 12, 14 of them. Everybody rides your bumper. Like you said, they want to pass you. And yet at the same time, like right now with the snow, you can't find them. So you're going around and you're going slow because you know they're there and this guy's on your rear. And like Dan said, the guy goes around you and all of a sudden he's all over and you're whacking the next one without even knowing it. And your plows can't plow them. Not when you have that many of them. It just doesn't, and the public hates them. They don't know who put them in. It's a HUD project. They put them in a way, and every person that I had contacted in there said, you gotta take these out. They're horrible.
And again, I think that part of the conversation has to be with fire departments, schools, because I mean, you ever ridden on the back of a school bus and it goes over a speed bump?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that's why we would like some time to be able to sit with Public Works, sit with the police department, reach out to the fire districts, get some input from them. So it may take us a little while before we can bring back, but what we try to do, I think, is put together maybe a couple of option packages that we think might make some sense after those discussions. And then, maybe that's what we put out to the residents is if they like, option one, option two, or no option, or however we phrase it. But
Yeah, that works.
and Trustee Guyer, point made, and Trustee Lee, for sure. That is the age-old issue with any of these, especially speed bumps. You generally, the people that have to drive the residential neighborhood every day have to deal with those. Now, you might get some, if you put enough of them, you might start to get some of the cut-through traffic not to want to encounter that, but at the price that each, residential customer has to drive through there and encounter them. So
What they end up doing is taking something on one of the speed bumps, chop it off with hammers or whatever, so that you can go around to the left around it and don't have to go over the top of it. And I learned where it was and I did that. But the kids love it. They think it's funny, but my monitor and me, I mean, my teeth are jamming together. It's just, but they completely destroyed it on one. And it must have been that guy that lived around there that just said, we're gonna get rid of that third of that so I can drive through.
Yeah, if you drive down West Downer in Aurora too, they've got some of those speed table humps there. And every one of them has some pretty aggressive scrapes in them. I'm not sure if they're from the snow plows, from the cradle that holds the plow in the front, or if it's from cars or what, but
Yeah,
I'm telling you, you have to slow down to go over those things.
Yeah.
About 10 mile an hour and that's it.
you know, another area where they have quite a few is in Plainfield on their, in their downtown area where they, you know, where they want to slow people down for the commercial outside dining and stuff. So they're around. So I would encourage you to, you know, maybe seek out and drive a few too, so you get a feel for them.
I like those a little bit better because they're actual tables. You know, you kind of go up and then you drive a while and then you go down. But could you guys also reach out to the school district? It would just be good to know what their bus route looks like in there. I know they shouldn't throw them under the bus, but I know that they do move their bus stops kind of frequently, it seems like. They did that in my neighborhood and it created a whole thing, but they do it for their reasons, and I'm not second guessing that. But it'd be good to know kind of where they run through there, because I know they do. And I know you have a couple more stop sign stuff to go over, right?
Yes, we'd like to talk about River and Webster, and again, I'm gonna turn it back.
Just want to say a couple things real quick.
Sure, sorry.
I don't want anybody that would listen or hear this to say the police don't think that there's a problem. We absolutely do. And the biggest complaint we have is people that live there say, hey, my children are here and they play here. The last thing we want is anybody injured. So for sure, we welcome all these changes so that we can make it a safer place for everybody. The thing, you know, when they put the stoplight in, we thought that it would have a bigger impact, but it only decreased traffic 11%. But you have to remember, that's because it's an option. It's not mandatory. So if it's convenient for me to go that way, then I'm going to go that way, unfortunately. So I thought we would see a bigger decrease after the light went in, but people, if they don't have it, that's their choice. So there was no like, you will go this way because it's better. But so that was that. And then with the speed tables and speed bumps, also in Plainfield, we spoke to them. Part of the problem you're gonna have to do is people will speed between the tables to make up for having to slow down. So regardless, there's always pros and cons, but again, we welcome any discussion and changes so that we can make it a safer place.
So you're saying spike strips then?
Spike strips one way is one thing.
Yeah. You know, and I don't know if this would help or if you looked at this, but turn restrictions off of Concord for, you know, a portion of the day, if it's a certain time of day.
They're not gonna follow that.
Well, some people do. Some people do follow the rules of the road. Not everybody, but I don't know if you looked at that. I was required to do that on a project once, and maybe it'll help. I don't know. It's annoying, but maybe it works.
We'll certainly look at it. Yep. So the second area we wanted to talk about is River and Webster Street. So I'm gonna let, again, Chris go through this.
Yeah, so we, one of the other areas that we did a stop sign study and traffic counts was at River Street and Webster Street. So we did the count on December 9th from 3:30 to 5:30. What we found was traffic was about equal, 513 vehicles on River Street, with the predominant movement being turning right onto Webster Street, and then 452 vehicles on Webster Street, with the, you know, the predominant movement being turning left on Webster onto River Street. But what we found was that there is a decent amount of vehicles that do go straight at River Street. And that kind of created a couple things. So we did the multi-way stop warrants and determined that with vehicle pedestrian conflicts, specifically with people crossing from the north side of the street to George's without the right turners having to stop, as well as cars turning left on Webster and cars going south on River not having to stop, and kind of having conflicts with that. So we recommend, based on the warrants, that would be converted to a 4-way stop sign. based on the vehicle pedestrian conflicts as well as left turn conflicts.
One of the things that you may recall, a few years ago, we routed truck traffic off of River Street, put it onto Mill to Main and then onto Webster. One of the reasons why we were reluctant to put in a multi-way stop at that intersection was that we didn't want trucks stopping on the incline and then having to pull out, that way. We've now eliminated the truck traffic there. And I don't know, I think most of us have probably observed close calls at that intersection. I particularly, I drive that quite often. And obviously now with COVID, we're not seeing the same amount of pedestrian traffic there. But I can tell you in the summer, on weekends, when you come that way, if you aren't cautious, there is a lot of people that are parallel parking and then walking over to George's to get, breakfast or whatever. So it's a concern, I think. And, we have a situation where, we've got a lot of near collisions there. And it seems like it's an appropriate change to make into the downtown. So we wanted to bring that to you. It'll be a significant change because a lot of us have been driving it a long time. So we would, we would go with some sort of an illuminated stop sign if we go forward with it. But we think, and this is, police, public works, and engineering have looked at this, and we believe that that's an appropriate change. But, we do recognize it is a major change too. So we wanted to bring it here to get consensus from you all.
What do you think, Denny?
Well, this is it. The people coming up River Street, up the hill, if they don't turn your direction light on, like me, and I'm gonna go straight, these people watch and what, 452 turn. So there's only 42 of us that go straight. So they see everybody coming and they just take off when they see the car there. And you can go right up to them and go like this, and they're like, oh, I didn't know. Yeah, it's really funny on it. But at the same time, you got 400 cars that turn right. And you're gonna put those 400 all the way back down the hill. And between those time slots, you're gonna have them all the way back to the stop sign at the bottom. In the same way, when the trains come, all of a sudden they let them go and you got like 30 cars that just pile all the way down to George's. And I guess it'll work, but you're gonna have a harder time with the people down below because they're gonna be stuck and they can't turn to go up the hill because there's gonna be cars there because they all gotta stop now. And that's just, I think you're gonna have a few problems, especially in the winter time when, like you say, you go up that hill, it's really, it's slick.
So it's not where I thought you were gonna go with that, but.
No, it's still, you're probably right. You should have one there because you could hit a guy and it's not gonna be your fault, it's his fault, but he's gonna argue about it. But, because it's always been that way. So everybody always just looks and just takes a left.
Yeah, so the whole first part of that, I was part of the 42 for 6 years that would go straight at that intersection. And we got to the point where we would actually drive in the opposite lane as you get closer to that intersection to make it visually impossible for somebody to turn in front of you. But I know Shar probably has PTSD over the screeching tires in that intersection. I mean, and Dan probably had the same experience that it's darn time that we do something there. So I really appreciate you looking at this.
I've almost been hit 2 or 3 times.
Yeah.
Crossing the street from George's to MEDC for a meeting because those cars are coming around that corner.
Yeah.
And there's a pretty good sized bush there that in the summertime, there's definitely a visual impairment there, but yeah, those cars are coming around that corner pretty quick.
Yeah, I think, Denny, there will be potential for a stacking issue at different times, but I think that's a better problem to have than the current configuration of that intersection.
Yeah, they put it at the right times there, 3 to 5 and 12 to 9. And that's definitely when their problem is. And I hope of the 42 idiots that go straight, they don't go up to the top of the hill because they can't turn left. And they go down Main Street, because if they go down Main Street, I want to tell you, to get across that intersection is horrible. You can't get across that intersection. It's just, it gets so much traffic
know.
from those trains. God, the trains are just ridiculous.
I made that connection as soon as you
You
said
don't, you
it.
don't come our way anymore.
Yeah, yeah, we're on board.
So would you have to
So one
redesign?
thing I would note is just what you might see with the stacking issue is, I think you're probably gonna see, because you don't have, now it's stop controlled, I think you're gonna see more people going straight at Mill and River than turning left. Would be my guess, especially if it is stacked up too.
Yep, that's how I cut. I don't want to say cut through anymore because I feel like I'm gonna get in trouble.
Apparently, you're not allowed
That's
to
how
drive
I
on
get-
public roadways.
Yeah, that's how I get through downtown when I'm not stopping at Village Hall. Dan, did you have anything that you were gonna
Speeding
add?
on River then, I mean,
Yeah.
So would you have to redesign that intersection? I'm looking at a satellite image right here, and it's pretty wide on River Street, and there's parking on both sides, and it's at an angle. When River Street goes south, it's at an angle. Would you have to change the width of the road at the intersection? Would you contemplate putting a right turn lane in there as part of the stop? How would you, I'm just kind of trying to envision how you would put a stop sign up there that everybody would see and
Right.
would stop.
No, and good point. And, you know, whether we would have to add a small island to put the stop sign on and create the right turn. Yeah, we'll have to take a look at that. We didn't want to get too far into it. And if there was going to be, you know, if you were concerned about putting it in. So, yes.
I've talked about those stop signs that have lights around them wherever you see a lot of them in Oswego, say, in Aurora. Of course, asked Todd on one, not right there, but somewhere else, and he said, they're too expensive. And I went, then why do these other towns have so many of them? I don't know if they're solar or what, but a sign with lights on it, people will see.
So that's exactly what we're proposing for this particular additional stop sign. One of the things though too that has changed dramatically, and I'm sure that, I know that Chris has dealt with this in another community and Pete as well. The cost of those signs has dramatically come down over the years. Also, the longevity of those signs has increased. They are solar powered and they've made a lot of advancements in that technology. So there are benefits now that probably weren't there, 3 or 4 years ago.
Yeah.
All right.
All right. go
Okay,
ahead,
well,
Pete.
we're not done yet.
Yeah, well, who'd have thought the board has comments on stop signs?
Okay, so next, we're going to talk about some changes we want to make to the brick paver crosswalks that we have on River. So again, I'll let Chris take over.
Yeah, so while we're going through doing the resurfacing, we wanted to take a look at the existing brick paver crosswalks, and we've come up with a different approach, or I guess different solution would be to remove the existing brick paver crosswalks. We would be removing the furthest one to the south and not reinstalling it because there's issues with ADA compliance and cross slope. And then reinstalling the other two, as well as installing decorative crosswalks at Mill and River and Webster. And what it would be decorative striping that looks like bricks. And I'll show you a picture on the next slide, but this gives you an aerial of what it would look like. So there would be 4 crosswalks at River and Webster, and then that southernmost one would be removed completely. And then the other 2 would be put back. And then 4-way decorative striping at River and Mill. The next slide will show you what the crosswalks look like. So it's a product we've used in another community. Basically, what you do is you put down the base layer, which acts as your grout, if you will, between the stencil, and then they make a stencil and paint that in brick red or whatever color you want. And then they do the striping on the outside. So the top left would be the base layer being installed. The top right would be what it looks like when it's brand new. And then those 2 bottom pictures are actually what the crosswalk looks like 2 years later. And there is community, one location this is used that I know it got installed was in Schaumburg at Algonquin Road and I think National Parkway that has, 40,000 cars a day and it seems to be holding up fine. I know Sean said that they used to have these in downtown Naperville and he said that they've lasted pretty long down there. So the longevity of the striping lasting is pretty good.
Is this different paint than what we use on the mural?
Absolutely. This is a more of an epoxy based
Okay.
paint, yeah. With longer cure time, we'd have to have the road closed for it to cure out as opposed to the normal traffic paint that we use, which is, this the basic.
Okay, no, because I know we're repainting that every year. And
Yeah.
The correction, the rotary is taking care of that. Sorry. Yes.
On the map you had before, back then, where is your mid striping on River Street? Two of them, they said midway.
Yeah, so those would be where the existing brick paver crosswalks are now. So there's 3 existing mid-block brick paver crosswalks on River Street. The one to the south, which is in the red there, that one would be the one that's going to be completely removed and not put back in. And then the other 2 would be, the bricks would be removed and then we'd put in this, this new decorative striping there instead of the bricks.
So right by the cottage, where the paver is,
Yeah, that's one.
right to the bottom of the parking lot here, or outside the village hall there, the one that's up the hill would be gone.
By the charging station,
Yes.
by the new charging station.
Where's
Yeah.
the two you're gonna keep? You're gonna keep two?
The two, the cottage and right here going across by like VFW.
Because the
right
other
edge.
one was, where we probably should have had one was where they come out of Valley Doyle and they come across to their parking lot on the side of the building. They've already, when Jason's was there, a lady walked across and car hit her and broke her leg and it was a mess that night. And that was after a village meeting or something and it was not good, but I think they're gonna have a lot of people going across right there. If we can move it down a little bit, I don't know.
You're saying move it to the north?
So you would like to move the one that's furthest north now, either further north or put in a third one potentially?
Yeah, just a little bit more so that people can come out and they just walk straight across the parking lot, because that was the problem. They wouldn't go to the block because they're coming up the hill downstairs and they just walk straight, and straight is right in the middle of the block, and yet people stopped at the stop sign but still ran over her, and it was
Why don't you guys take a look at that?
So one of the neat things about this product, and this is actually, I'm glad Denny brought this up because it's actually one thing we did talk about was the development of Gray's Estates or the Mill Estates, was the potential that increasing pedestrian traffic. The beauty of this product is that we can easily accommodate additional crossings in the future at a moderate cost. Really what we need is to have an ADA accessibility each side of the roadway, and then we can complete that stenciling. So one of the neat things is, in my opinion, is instead of us trying to forecast what that foot pedestrian traffic is going to be, we can do this and implement it the way that we want. And then once we see that need for traffic, we can make a recommendation in our next year's IRP to add those ADAs and then complete that stenciling if we deem that there's additional crosswalks needed than what we're proposing. Now, also, we do want to take into account that if we feel that one of those isn't warranted and just moving it down to another location is a better option, that's something that we can evaluate too. But I wanted to point out that's one of the great kind of features about this is it can be added later on to a surface that now has, substantial life left on it as well.
One of my worries with adding one in this region, you can see between, if you're looking at the right of the screen there, it'd be between those last two, is that there's 3 lanes of traffic there. You're getting close to a stop sign controlled intersection. So why don't you guys take a look at that? If there's some improvements that we can make, we know there's about to be a lot more pedestrian traffic in the downtown. So thank you for looking at this. But look at it, make a recommendation.
It seems kind of, I get what you guys are trying to do, but it seems kind of backwards to me to remove existing paver crosswalks, which we've already spent the money to install, to take those out, to do fake paver looking
Right.
crosswalks.
So
Can't we keep the existing paver, which I think is going to hold up better over time anyway than even the epoxy? But I'm a brick guy. I like the actual brick better. Can't we somehow enhance those a little bit to make them look like that? It seems like, yeah, hey, the government spent money putting these pavers in. Yeah, let's rip them up and let's put fake pavers in.
So a couple of things to note here I'm gonna go back I believe it was 3 years ago, IRP program. We went through and we completely redid all the brick paver crosswalks on River Street specifically. In that 3-year time period, we're already seeing probably about 30% of those bricks are starting to deteriorate. The big issue that we run into is you've got multiple surfaces. So one of the key factors that we have as Public Works is plowing snow. You've got those 3 different material types that move at different rates when it comes to winter. So what we have is we have an asphalt surface, then concrete ribbon, then brick paver. So we have those 3 surfaces that like to move all separately. And so what we find is that's a big maintenance issue for us, that we're hitting that first edge with our plow and then causing damage to the pavers. Now, not all of the damage to the pavers is due specifically to snow removal, but it's a huge impact. So I guess what I'm getting at is when we determined or we looked at this, this other stenciling product, we feel that we're going to get substantially more longevity out of the stenciling. I agree with you. There's nothing better aesthetically wise than an actual paver. But when we look at it from a maintenance standpoint, it's dramatically more expensive to continue to maintain. I understand there was initial cost to put that in, but the damage that we're causing to our own snow removal equipment, on top of the damage to the ribbons and the bricks, we feel that this is going to mitigate a lot of those issues. So again, we've already seen that those bricks are already starting to deteriorate after only 3 years of time.
Are you running any snowshoes on your?
Yes.
Okay.
So
Yeah,
one
those
other
can catch
one other
pulse, those
question
shoes.
that I would ask Pete or Chris is this also an ADA concern for these crossings, that if they do start to deteriorate or if some of these bricks pop up that they don't really meet ADA? I mean, is that another factor?
Yeah, I mean, it's a potentially a factor. Definitely that south one is not, there's no way we're getting it ADA compliant unless you want your road to have, a ramp in it basically, which is fine, but for rideability purposes, it's not good. And potentially, if you hit it at the right speed, you could, go airborne, I suppose.
Yeah.
The middle one is borderline compliant. It's pretty close cross-slope wise. The north one is fine, but again, the issues would be if you have bricks popping out, if someone trips and falls because one of the bricks is gone or higher than the other, you could potentially have issues.
And I know years ago, at least, the state was starting to crack down a little bit more on public entities, making sure that their crosswalks were ADA compliant. And so I wouldn't want to get into that. So, I mean, it's a point well taken to do that, but at least this eliminates the staff time, plow damage. Getting into this in the future, we will need to repaint these, I would assume, every X number of years, but it eliminates a lot of unknowns. So I get it.
And again, not to beat a dead horse, but there are other factors that were taken into place here. And one of those too was closure time of the street. So when we did the refurbishing of those brick ribbons, we had River Street closed for 2 weeks. So looking at this new product, our closure time would be substantially less as well.
Yeah, they would put those across so that you go to the VFW from here. But I remember that 3 years ago, and you had bricks turned going up in the air, and you had the ones on the corner that were chipped off. And I remember calling saying, you got to do something too. These cars are driving over it. And they're diving around it because the bricks were literally just popped right up like, I don't know if it was a snowplow or what, but they were not in good shape at all.
When the brick were installed, were they installed on a bituminous setting bed and?
They're installed on a concrete bed.
Okay, but if they're on a concrete bed, I install pavers all the time. If it's on a concrete bed, there's got to be some sort of
Yeah,
setting.
There's a sand layer, correct.
Well, you can't install pavers on a sand if it's vehicular anyway, because as cross traffic goes, those pavers move. It's got to be on a bituminous setting bed.
We should dive into the cross-section of our pavers that we're about to remove.
That was, yeah, so the cross-section is a
You say
concrete.
that the pavers are moving, and that's one of the reasons the pavers are moving. It's because they were installed incorrectly.
I mean, they were installed per the detail.
Yeah, let's move
The
past this.
detail's incorrect.
We can argue roadway cross-sections if you like, and I'd love to dive into that. I know more than some, but let's not. Point taken, though. We put them in, 12 years later, we got to remove them. Pete, any other slides?
Just a summary. I think we'll come back with, let you know what geometric improvements we have to make at the intersection and how we'll install a stop sign, but we do intend to use an illuminated stop sign, and then we'd like to go forward with the decorative crosswalks. So,
Sounds good.
thank you.
Engineer Wallers, can I request a copy of that? I did not have that in my board packet. I don't know if that's something you handed out this evening or if I was supposed to receive that, but I did not have that. So if I could just make sure I get a copy of that, I'll come by. I'm actually planning to come by tomorrow. So if I could have a copy of that in my mailbox, I'd appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Pete, Chris, thank you. Appreciate it. Any other comments from the board? Lengthy, but a good conversation, beneficial, especially for them as they're redesigning and trying to get this stuff built this year. So, all right, moving on. Anything new or unfinished?
I miss Mr. Zoffel and his snacks up here at the board table as I'm getting hangry.
Yes.
We have all of this to blame on you.
Yep.
All right. Anything else?
Teresa has her hand up.
Teresa? Nothing for you? Okay.
No, thank you.
Put your hand down then.
I wore my shirt tonight, but I'm not bragging about it because if they'd have went for a touchdown instead of a field goal, it would have been a different game. But Mr. Youngerman's team looks a lot better this next year. And you'll be hearing from him because I won't be here.
Thank you. One last Green Bay update.
Yeah. Oh, Rogers is engaged now, in case.
There you go. We'll put a resolution on the next meeting, congratulating him. All right, future meetings, beautification, and then you can see our committee of the whole is canceled. Intergovernmental will be moved. Our next village board meeting is 2 weeks from tonight, February 22nd, in this room at 7 p.m. We do not have executive session this evening, so with that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Trustee Youngerman. Yes. Trustee Marisak.
Yes.
Trustee Detzinger.
Yep.
Trustee Guyer.
Yes.
Trustee Lee.
Yes.
Trustee Spurling.
Yes.
And we're adjourned. Thank you.
Good night.